Okay, good evening. We're going to go ahead and start the meeting. Call to order. It's 7 p.m. Roll call, Madam Clerk. Roll call, Madam Clerk. Sir, President, could you get your phones to... Thank you. Here?
Here.
Here.
We could stand for the pledge, please.
Yes, ma'am. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Every time you say that, you have to do it right. I almost forget the beginning of it. That's
You're fine. Are there any addition withdrawals? Well, actually, before we get started, just want to say that unfortunately our manager couldn't be with us this evening. He had a death in the family and was called away. If we can go ahead and ask for any addition, deletions, or withdrawals from the agenda. The only comment I'm going to make is I'm going to restate my objection for item 11A on the same grounds that I've previously stated my objections. Thank you. Presentation. We have a presentation this evening, but we have two proclamations first. So we have Red Ribbon Week, Hispanic Heritage Month, are two proclamations. And I'm going to ask my wonderful colleagues to help me out here, since I've got a little bit of a throat issue. Would you be so kind as to read Red Ribbon Week? And then would you be so kind to read Hispanic Heritage?
Whereas communities across America have been plagued by the numerous problems associated with illicit drug use and those that traffic them, and whereas there is hope in winning the war on drugs, and that hope lies in education and drug demand reduction, coupled with the hard work and determination of organizations such as the Young Marines of the Marine Corps League to foster a healthy, drug-free lifestyle, and whereas governments and community leaders know that citizen support is one of the most effective tools in the effort to reduce the use of illicit drugs in our communities, and whereas the red ribbon has been chosen as a symbol commemorating the work of Enrique Kiki Camarena, a Drug Enforcement Administration agent who was murdered in the line of duty, and represents the belief that one person can make a difference. And whereas the Red Ribbon Campaign was established by Congress in 1988 to encourage a drug-free lifestyle and involvement in drug prevention and reduction efforts, and whereas October 23rd through the 31st has been designated National Red Ribbon Week, which encourages Americans to wear a red ribbon to show their support for a drug-free environment. And now, therefore,
I'm Mayor Tubman,
Mayor of the Village of Biscayne Park, Florida, joined by the entire Commission, do hereby proclaim October 23rd through 31st as Red Ribbon Week in Biscayne Park, and urge all citizens to join me in this special observance.
Thank you. Would you mind borrowing this mic if that's working?
Hispanic Heritage Month. Hispanic Americans, a history of serving our nation. Whereas during National Hispanic Heritage Month, September 15 to October 15, we recognize the contributions made and the important presence of Hispanic and Latino Americans to the United States and celebrate their heritage and culture. And whereas Hispanics have had a profound and positive influence on our country through their strong commitment to family, faith, hard work, and service. They have enhanced and shaped our nation's character with centuries-old traditions that reflect the multi-ethnic and multicultural customs of their communities. And whereas the term Hispanic or Latino refers to Puerto Rican, South or Central America, or other Spanish culture or origin regardless of race. On the 2010 census form, people of Spanish, Hispanic, and or Latino origin could identify themselves as Mexican, Mexican American, Chicano, Puerto Rican, Cuban, or another Hispanic, Latino, or Spanish origin. And whereas today 55 million people, or 17% of the American population, are of Hispanic or Latino origin. This represents a significant increase from 2000, which registered the Hispanic population at 35.3 million, or 13% of the total U.S. population. And now, therefore, be it resolved that Mayor of the Village of Biscayne Park, Florida, joined by the entire commission, do hereby proclaim September 15, 2019 to October 15, 2019 as Hispanic Heritage Month, and encourage observation of this special annual tribute by learning and celebrating the generations of Hispanic and Latino Americans who have positively influenced and enriched our nation and society.
Thank you very much. We have a presentation, but Javier Bencourt from CITT, and if you both would like to come up, Nestor as well, if you want to come up, please.
See, good evening, is this on? Yeah.
Mr. Nestor, can
Good.
you state your name, your full name, please?
Nestor Toledo, CITT.
The last name, please?
Toledo.
Toledo. Thank you.
Good evening, Javier Betancourt, Executive Director, the Citizens Independent Transportation Trust. Thank you for having us here this evening. I appreciate your time. And by the way, I've always dreamed of owning a log cabin in the Appalachians, and so I feel like I'm there now. This is fantastic. Well done. I understand that it was recently renovated, and a really nice job. So I'm here to present an update on the People's Transportation Plan, both kind of globally, and then if you have specific questions about how it applies here in your community, I'd be happy to have that discussion as well. I am the Executive Director. Nestor is the municipal liaison to all of the cities throughout Miami-Dade County, so he works with your administration on a regular basis, and I have to say we have a great working relationship with your city manager, with the Public Works Director. This administration has really done a lot to connect to the CITT and ensure that we move projects forward. And it's really come a long way since a number of years ago where we had some issues that we had to work through. So congratulations to you. I think we're in a good place and about to embark on some good things. Let's see. Is this on?
Just give us 1 second.
Okay. So I believe you have it in front of you. Apologize to members in the audience, but I'll go ahead and get started in the interest of time, and hopefully we could get that worked out. So quick overview. Back in 2002, oh, there we go. Perfect. Now I just have to click on the right button. All right. Which one is it? This is a recorder. This is not the clicker, is it? I apologize. I may have messed this up, by the way. You might want to take a look at it. Is there a clicker? Okay. So, in 2002, the good voters of Miami-Dade County approved a ballot referendum that increased their sales tax from 6.5% to 7%. You may remember that. You may have voted for it. You may have voted against it. It passed. And since 2002, we've been collecting that extra half penny towards a list of transportation projects called the People's Transportation Plan. Also, as part of that referendum, the citizens created the Citizens Independent Transportation Trust in order to provide oversight over those funds and ensure that they were spent appropriately. That is the organization that Nestor and I are with. Next. Okay. So we're really the support staff to the CITT. The CITT is actually a volunteer board of 15 members, one appointed by each commission, each district commissioner, the mayor, and the Dade League of Cities. The member that represents this area is actually the former mayor of El Portal, Dr. Anna Lightfoot Ward, who wanted to be here this evening, but she is recovering from an accident, so wasn't able to. But these are the folks that meet once a month to do the work of the CITT. And by the way, we have a number of vacancies on. Please send us an application. Vacancies come up from time to time. While there isn't one for this particular district at the moment, things happen. So let us know. We're guided by several documents, Florida statute, which enabled the surtax to take place, a couple of county ordinances, obviously our bylaws, but all of this, the projects, which is what most people are interested in, are included in what we call our 5-year plan. And all of that information is available online at www.miami-dade.gov/CITT. We take a lot of pride in being transparent. Everything we do, every penny of that half penny is available online for your information. One of the primary functions of the CITT is to audit the county and all of the municipalities to ensure that the surtax funds are used appropriately. There are rules governing what the dollars can be used for. In the case of the city, 20% of your funds have to be used on transit. That could be a circulator, a trolley, increasingly now on-demand service, and 80% can be used on other transportation or public works type of projects, whether that be roadway work, drainage, etc. So we audit the municipalities on a regular basis and work with the municipalities to address the issues that come up. A brief history of revenue. Since 2002, we've collected over $3 billion surtax proceeds. 66% of that, so roughly 2/3, has gone to Miami-Dade Transit for a number of things, operations and maintenance, but also some capital expansion, including the expansion of Metro Rail to the airport. 22% goes to the cities. That's distributed on a pro rata basis by population. Only 8% has gone to the Department of Public Works in the county. So I think there's some discussion in the community that all of the money has gone to roadway projects. It's not true. A very small percentage of it has actually gone to roadway. I think the confusion lies in that people that haven't seen the transit improvements, whereas they see a lot of roadway projects being built. And that's because Public Works has done a very good job of actually implementing most of their projects. And then finally, less than 1% goes to fund our office for administrative expenses. So we take great pride in limiting that to 1% or less, because we want the bulk of the money to go to projects to service our mission. Okay, so here's a list of the original PTP promises. People remember the ballot language, the ballot synopsis. Actual people's transportation plan is a laundry list of not only transit improvements, but also roadway improvements, and a number of other promises, including the golden path. That's fare-free transit for all seniors over 65, regardless of income. And then later on, they also added a Patriot Passport to provide for fare-free transit for veterans under a certain age. It also promised fare-free Metro Mover and a number of smaller neighborhood improvement projects such as traffic signalization and some repaving. And so where's all that money going? Well, we implemented the Golden Passport immediately upon adoption, so that's been in place since 2000. Did extend Metro Rail to the Orange Line, Metro Rail to the airport. That was one of the promised for. And unfortunately, that was the only rapid transit line built in Dade. We've also replaced, or are replacing, all of the fleet Metro Mover vehicles, Metro Rail vehicles, Metro bus vehicles are all being replaced with new, modern, eco-friendly vehicles. As I said, 20% of the funds have gone to cities as promised, and the cities have done a great job with their 20%. All the circulators you see throughout the county, all the trolleys are paid for nearly 100% by surtax. A number of roadway projects, as I said, have been completed, and the county is also in the process of completing their advanced traffic management system. That basically is a fancy way of saying smart signals at intersections that allow for greater efficiency and greater capacity on our existing roads. Here again is just a snapshot of what the municipalities have done. These are all the routes. There are currently 27 routes serving 29 municipalities throughout the county. The ridership has been phenomenal. We've seen year over year growth of, on average, 10%. And now we're carrying about just just under 14 million passengers through all of those municipal systems. So that's been an incredible success. They've been very popular. We know, we understand that it's much harder for cities of this size to be able to operate circulators. In some cases, some small cities such as Virginia Gardens and Hialeah Gardens have partnered with their larger neighbors to partner on providing a remote service. That might be a possibility here. I know it's been tried in the past. But certainly, Miami Shores, North Miami, and some others maybe that's something to explore. As I said, the other success of the plan has been the roadway projects. Of the 42 that were promised, 74% have been completed. The other quarter are pretty much underway. So that was the good news. Now the bad news. I like to be honest with people when I present and share the bad news as well. We were supposed to increase bus service throughout the county by 63%. You see that yellow bar there on the chart? That's where we were at 2002. Year after year, for the first years, we started increasing bus service throughout the county. Then the recession hit, and that number started coming back down. Today, if you look at that pink bar at the far end, that's where we are today. And it's eerily similar to that yellow bar starting again. So we have not fulfilled the promise of enhanced bus service throughout this county. The county is working with a group, you may have read about the paper called Transit Alliance, to reconfigure the bus network, which they call the Better Bus Network. We'll see what the outcome of that study is. The other unfulfilled promise, and the one I think that's on everyone's mind, is the rapid transit. This was Metro Rail as it existed in 2002. This was the promise that was made as part of the People's Transportation Plan, right? An expansion of Metro Rail or other types of rapid transit in practically every corner of the county. And yet today, 17 years later, the only progress we've made here is that one little extension of Metro Rail to the airport. So clearly an unfulfilled promise. The good news is we are working towards fulfilling that promise. Again, this was the original PTP, the corridors, and today we are working towards implementation of a strategic mining area rapid transit plan. I'm sure you've heard of this as well, the SMART plan. And if you look at those two maps, you find that they're eerily similar because it's the same plan with a new name. So in implementing the SMART plan, we will be implementing the original People's Transportation Plan. And both ourselves, the Transportation Planning Organization, and the County Transit Department are working very hard to making that plan a reality. All right. So for those who maybe are unaware of the SMART plan, it's essentially 6 corridors of rapid transit, not necessarily Metro Rail, although they're looking at Metro Rail, but also possibly Metro Hoover extension, monorail, bus rapid transit along those 6 corridors. The beach, east-west, largely parallel to 836, the Kendall corridor along the drive, the north corridor along 27th Avenue, the northeast corridor along the existing FEC Broadline Virgin Train corridor, and the south corridor down to Florida City. Kind of helping to connect all that together is a series of what we call Bus Express rapid transit corridors. Those are envisioned as express buses that will run either in the shoulder of expressways or in an exclusive lane, much like the I-95 Express that runs in the express lanes on 95. So those are being explored as well. Get that. The 2 priorities identified both by the county and the DPO are the South Bay corridor and the North corridor. The South Bay corridor is actually making a lot of progress. They selected bus rapid transit or BRT for that particular corridor. We are committing $100 million. The state has committed $100 million, and there's an application to the federal government for the final $100 million, $300 million project. The county anticipates to start construction on that shortly, and it's probably going to take about 7 years. The North Corridor is the other priority along 27th Avenue. The consultants on that are scheduled to present to the DPO, I believe, in October with a final technology that they will recommend. DPO then will make a decision. Metro Rail, it's going to be monorail, Metro Hoover, what they're going to have to take a big on. And that obviously has a lot of implications for cost, the amount of time that it will take to complete. So we know about the half-day. That is one funding source to complete the SMART plan, but it's not enough. It's nowhere near enough to make those we are really looking at what we call a funding lasagna, layers upon layers upon layers of different funding sources that we can cobble together to make this happen. So our half penny is one of them. We have that secured. CPO has identified another $1 billion that they can put towards that plan. And the county recently passed what they call a tax increment finance district along every one of the corridors that will capture the rising taxable value along the corridor and reinvest that back into the corridor. That's going to generate another $2 billion. So we have a few billion identified for implementation. We need more. And you see all those other sources of potential revenue sources that we're looking at. So that's the core of what we do. In addition, our members have taken some interest in some of these other things. We've become big proponents of first, last mile solutions, such as bicycle infrastructure. I actually gave up my car and I bike to work one day and I take transit the other days. And when I really need to, I'll hop on a Uber. And it's a fantastic way to move around town. But if we don't connect people to transit and from transit to the ultimate destination, first, last mile solution, transit is never going to be successful. We're going to continue to lose riders. So that's a key component of what we're looking to do. Enhancing connectivity. So we have the county system, we have Tri-Rail, and then we have 27 independently run trolley systems. And they don't necessarily connect as well as they should, both physically and via technology. So we are working with the county to develop an app where all of those things can come together so that you as a consumer, you just want to get from point A to point B. You don't care who's running with it. And currently, it's very difficult to do that given all the different providers of the service. So we're trying to merge those things to make it easier for the consumer. System maintenance and cleanliness, we're not satisfied with the level of maintenance and cleanliness of the system. It's something my members bring up at every meeting. I'm sure those of you who ride transit aren't satisfied with it. So we are increasingly focused in providing oversight over that and trying to help the transit department address those issues. And finally, community outreach. We have done a very poor job communicating what we've done with the people transportation planning in the community. So it's been one of my commitments since I started here a couple of years ago to do that. That's why I'm here today. That's why I'm going to all the cities. That's why I'm going to more business groups in the community. If there is a business group or community group here that's like to hear this presentation as well, I'd be more than happy to do it. We even put out executive letters now in the newspaper. We believe that he deserves to know what's happening with your happening. Good, bad, hopeful, whatever the case is. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the commission? Vice Mayor.
I forgot your name again. What we discussed outside, if you can talk about, it's on. Can you hear me now? Yeah, okay. Could you discuss on the money, the money that we have, what we chances of losing our money, the 20%?
So currently, the city has not been spending its allocation. And that's been kind of coming together to the tune of, I think we have about $800,000 plus or minus that's been collected over time. Typically, you need to spend that within 5 years of collection. If you don't, then we're supposed to recapture those funds and allocate it to the other cities. We haven't done that here. We prefer not to do that. We prefer to work with cities to address the issues. We want you to use your money. We want your citizens to benefit from the sales tax that they're paying. So as I said earlier, we have been working with the administration to figure out how you can best spend those dollars. And again, there's two components. 20% of your funds have to be spent on some kind of transit improvement. That could be a circulator, it could be a transit stop, enhancing your bus station, or it could be ADA improvements associated with that. The other 80% can be spent on other transportation improvements, paving the roads, sidewalks, bicycle infrastructure, drainage improvements. That's much more flexible and much easier to spend. So I think we're confident that you're going to be able to spend that. The transit component, again, for a city of your size, is very difficult. You really don't have enough. I mean, you've collected enough to maybe get a system started, but you may not have enough coming in on a regular basis to keep that in operation. And that's where we try to suggest it's really not our place. The democracy is really should not be up to the community. But we do try and encourage municipalities to work with their neighbors to make them provide a service that we're not able to provide. However, at some
Any fellow commission questions?
No, thank you, Mr. Vice Court. We had an opportunity. Okay,
Just go.
back on? Working? Okay. Thank you. We had an opportunity to meet in advance of his presentation. I wanted to get some clarification on the sidewalk project that we committed to when we voted on our legislative priorities at the outset in early December. And Mr. Betancourt made it clear that within the 80% public works portion of our CITT, of that 800,000, we could absolutely dedicate that to some sort of sidewalk project should that be determined to be a priority. I know we have a lot of road improvements to make, and the manager and the public works director do have things earmarked, but just so you know, the funds would be appropriately apportioned that way. Should we look to the other 20%, the transit 20%, there is an axis of walkway that we could create around any given transit stop of a certain measure. I think Mr. Toledo could speak in more detail to that, should you all be interested in hearing it. But that could be the beginnings of, in a certain way, our own first or last mile tidbit coming from the bus stops on the north and south of 6th Avenue. So just so you know, we had an opportunity to discuss that, and if you all had any further questions around that legislative priority we all voted in favor of, this might be the time to ask.
There's another option, so you can partner, you can create your own transit service, you can partner with a neighboring municipality, you can also partner with the county. So the county has existing routes coming through or serving the city. You could always partner with them on enhancing those routes, enhancing the stops, adding stops. That's another possibility. In fact, there's one city, Town of Public Way, that partners very closely with Miami-Dade County in providing enhanced county transit service.
May I ask you, just to be clear, you said there's also on-demand service. Could you talk a little bit more about that possibility for our residents?
It used to be that you could only use your transit portion of those funds for things like guideways, transit system, IT deployments. Last year, we amended the legislation to allow for those funds to be used for on-demand service. So what many municipalities have done with that is partnered with a provider of on-demand service. Most of them at this point have chosen Freebie. Required to go with that particular vendor, but that's been popular in the 5 or 6 that have gone down this path. And an on-demand service is much like Uber or Lyft. You know, there's an app. You call the service, it picks you up wherever you are. It takes you to wherever you want to go. One service on demand. Those are generally provided free of service to the customer. The funds are used to basically subsidize that service. It's not limited to exactly that type of service. I suppose you could also use it to partner with Uber or Lyft, subsidizing trips. No one's done that yet. I don't know if that's because Uber and Lyft haven't expressed an interest or if it's just complicated, but it's rather new territory, and many cities are experimenting.
Is there one of the concerns expressed was that our elderly population really has a greater use for it, and they're not exactly, most of them, playing around with apps. I'm not saying some aren't, but I'm just saying as a rule, it's more of a can we make a phone call. So does Freebie or any of these other services are more predisposed to be that the ability for the elderly to be able to access it?
As a matter of fact, once it becomes a public transportation service and not just a private company, they are required to meet what they call ADA requirements, which includes, working with the elderly. So when I worked for the city of Coral Gables prior to coming here, I brought Freebie to Coral Gables, and we created a 1-800 number that those who don't feel comfortable with apps or who don't have that ability to call the number and basically use it to dispatch service.
Okay, thank you. That was my bigger concern for our elderly. Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you so much for coming. This has been most helpful, and I'm sure we'll get together a plan to, I know we have a lot of priorities, and I think Commissioner Wise spoke to them, so thank you very much. And I appreciate your patience with us as well. Thank you. Just, a motion was not made, and so I'd like to correct this for the attorney's sake. I didn't make a motion to adapt the agenda as without amending, so I'd like to go ahead and do that now, if I may, belated. I should have done that before. Okay. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda?
Not the consent agenda?
The whole agenda.
No, I like to have One of the workshop communications, I want to, for transparency, we need to add the email that was sent out to the commissioners and mayor for the reason why there wasn't 4 commissioners. So I want to to be put into the minutes the email that was sent out to the commissioners and mayor in reference to the.
So when I ask for additions, which are on the agenda, you want to add that now?
Would that be? Oh, that would be. I'm sorry, I didn't know that. That's where I would add that. That would be just to add it for. Or I want just the email to be put into the minutes.
Can you work with the clerk, put it in the minutes?
Yeah.
And then we can, when those minutes come before us?
Yeah. So does it be taken out now?
Right,
That's
so
what I'm asking.
not yet, when we get the consent.
Oh, that's right. Okay, that's
Nope. So for the overall agenda, since we have another, is there a motion to approve the agenda?
I so move.
Is there a second?
my side.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
No, I was doing a lot of work with my end. Attorney Rodriguez, could you put through the decorum rules, and then we'll go ahead and open for public comment? Thank you, it keeps going off, and I don't know why this is the second one. Thank you for letting me know. Nope. I think we have a budget for new mics.
Sorry, I'm also sick. That better?
Yeah, do you want me to read it? Are you okay to read it?
No, I can read it.
Okay,
I
thank
just
you.
wasn't sure if it was me or the mic. All comments must be addressed to the commission as a body and not to individuals. Any person making impertinent or slanderous remarks or who becomes boisterous while addressing the commission shall be barred from further audience before the commission by the presiding officer unless permission to continue or again address the commission is granted by the majority vote of the commission members present. No clapping, applauding, heckling, or verbal outbursts in support or in opposition to a speaker or his/her remarks shall be permitted. No signs or placards shall be allowed in the commission chambers. Please mute or turn off your cell phone or pager at the start of the meeting. Failure to do so may result in being barred from the meeting. Persons exiting the chamber shall do so quietly.
Thank you. We'll open it for public comments. Madam Clerk, would you please call the first person?
Bob Anderson.
I'm sorry, could you wait a minute, Mr. Anderson? Could you get the timer up, please? We're having some technical difficulties. Our apologies. Caesar, would you be so kind? Your phone is ringing again. You could turn that off, please. Just keeps ringing. Oh.
Bob Anderson, 11th Place and 119th Street. I just want to let the commission know that you've broken a record.
Can't hear.
Test, test.
For your patience.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I mentioned that you broke a record for the amount of money that you've been spending for attorney's fees. $2,655 for an update on police social media use and policies. This is an example of the overcharging, and obviously there is no oversight on this. 12D, whistleblower protection. Voting for this will reduce illegal and unethical corruption in our government and reduce lawsuits if we let it keep going on. Voting no is indication that you are encouraging this. Every city needs to have their own ordinance to have their own employees covered. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Madam Clerk?
Roxas.
Good evening, Rox Ross, 11166 Griffin Boulevard. I'm happy to lead with good news today. Under item 8B, the Biscayne Park Foundation reports that rec center improvements in the manner of donated funds that were put to use to purchase a metal stage for Food and Tunes and other presentations. And the village manager assured the foundation that the long-awaited lighting project was in permitting and to be installed by the end of September. It would be super to have that completed by October 19th for Oktoberfest. And I sure hope that the manager followed the legally established procurement process to purchase that lighting and the services related. In any event, thanks very much to the volunteer members of the foundation for bringing these amenities to our community. I also want to speak on item 11B. I've been writing and speaking to you for months on the attorney's invoices without much feedback. Last month, the majority of you, Jenny, who unfortunately is not here today, Dan, and Will, overruled Tracy and spoke of a need to discuss attorney billings and future interactions. Please take up that discussion tonight and don't let another month slip by. It is a false argument for Tracy and Gray Robinson to now say that billing protests had to be made within 30 days of invoicing when Gray Robinson first breached the retainer agreement with double and triple attorney billings for commission meetings, including the meeting that was essentially their job interview. It was irresponsible for the manager to blindly sign off on payment and unconscionable for this commission to sanction those payments. You cannot bring about change without a discussion, and that discussion must take place in the sunshine. Don't neglect your duties on this item to the detriment of the village's finances. Item 12D, the village whistleblower protection ordinance. We all recognize, and most of you have said, that dedicated village employees are not among the highest paid for the work that they do for us. Here is a protective benefit for village employees that also empowers each of them to be responsible for efficient and effective government without retribution. Best of all, the framework is done free of charge by county attorneys. The legislation is already drafted. Technical support is provided by the Inspector General and the Ethics Commission. It is a win-win from every perspective. Please give this your honest consideration. Again, the mayor attaches to the minutes State Form 8B, the memo on her professed voting conflict, but the minutes and the video clearly show that she is not abiding by Miami-Dade County Code of Ethics, which requires that an elected official who claims a voting conflict must leave the room and not participate in discussion of the item. You can't have it both ways, declare yourself in conflict, and then continue to debate and even make motions on the item. When will the rest of the commission require corrective action? Thank you.
Madam Clerk?
Barbara Kuehl, 111th Street. I agree completely with what Bob said and with Rox about item 12D. And I'm also in favor of adopting the whistleblower ordinance. Our Employees should be protected, and if you're following the law, we should have nothing to be afraid of. In less than a year, we've had over 7 workshops. Very little has come out of any of these except wasting a lot of time and money and frustrating residents. Take the communications workshop that was supposed to happen last week. Only 1 commissioner and 2 residents showed up. I'm not going to get into how that ended up that way, but what would have been covered in the communications workshop? There was no backup. I guess our poorly performing e-blasts, a newsletter, how to get information to residents about hurricane preparedness, code changes, what's happening at the rec center, maybe bringing our website into the 21st century. The problem I have is this has been going on, and it's being brought by the commission, when really this is a job for the manager. Your village manager is in charge of getting information out to residents, the website, all these things. But month after month, you keep postponing talking about this communications workshop with the manager sitting here, but in the meantime, absolutely nothing has been done about that. The only thing you didn't have a workshop for was the Code Compliance Board. The manager just put resumes out from the magistrate on the agenda. No discussion with the Code Compliance Board, the commission, or the residents beforehand. You can beat to death communications, decorum meetings, meeting procedures, but you don't have the courtesy to have the discussion with the Code Compliance Board. You have not showed this board the respect that they deserve. And in case anybody isn't aware, all of the members have resigned. You have also ignored a serious complaint against our code officer that involves targeting and harassing residents. Her actions at the code meeting were so unprofessional that she really should have been terminated then. You were all made aware of this, and yet you approved a raise for her. It seems that you've decided to ignore this situation. You're aware of this act, you're doing nothing, and this makes you complicit. This isn't going away. Thank you.
Janie Anderson.
Janie Anderson, 11th Place and 119th Street. Regarding the whistleblower, that should be one of the rare and wonderful, quick, unanimous, don't kill it with paralysis by analysis approval. You can't say you care about our employees and not give them this extra protection.
Excuse me.
Regarding the...
Excuse me, Ms. Anderson, would you pull the mic down? Thank you. Pull the mic down. Pull it down. There you go.
Better. Regarding the attorney fees, even for those of you who take no issue with Rebecca's performance, you should still want a full accounting and accountability of all legal bills. Repayment of any overage should be immediate. There needs to be greater detail. Too many of the billable lines are very vague, and we don't know what we're paying for. And no one of you has any right to more attorney time than the other. Whether or not they sit in the mayor chair, you guys all have to be operating on the same level, which is why normally the manager dispenses information from the attorney. Policy and procedures. Okay, so what I'm hearing now, we can't approach the dais. What's that mean? Like during recesses and at the end of meetings, we have to, if we want to talk to someone who's still sitting there, we do what? Yell across the room? Think about this. At the end of last month's meeting, I was talking to Christian, I was about a foot away from the dais, about some Waste Pro issues, and Tracy started talking to me, so I walked up, talked to her. All of a sudden, I see this fine man towering over me, and when I let her know my displeasure at that ridiculous and unnecessary show of power, she's, oh, well, we can go outside and talk. So I couldn't talk on the other side of the dais, but we could have gone outside and talked. I haven't figured out the logic in that one yet. You know, for as long as I can remember, commissioners have dealt with far tougher, opinionated, and you know what, even angry residents in packed meeting rooms. And yet they were all smart enough to know that tightening the screws on people doesn't make a problem go away. Let them vent, deal with an issue head on, come to a resolution. That's what leaders do. You know, and they didn't enforce this tight 3 minutes, and there was no threat of expulsion, but meetings would end by 10:30 with the agendas finished. Now, according to this draft ordinance, we can be expelled for the very kind of language we hear frequently from Betsy, Tracy, and lately even Christian, because there's all sorts of paragraphs about what we can and can't do, and there isn't the equal amount of space, say, put for commissioners and employees. You know, you can't spin or try to market this ordinance other than what it is. Congrats on being the first Biscayne Park Commission to basically legislate repression of our residents.
Could you hit the button, please? Thank you.
2025 Griffin Boulevard, Biscayne Park.
I'm sorry,
I
Deb.
resigned from the...
Oh, I'm sorry, Joe. Could you hold on 1 second? Could you please restart the clock?
I'm not going to take that long because I'm a little ticked off. It was with no lack of... It was with an lack of respect that the code board members were given for this to have occurred without any contact with us. I have been a compliance officer or on the compliance board for almost 20 years. We have had issues that have been brought before us, discussions. There has not been once in the recent past, or since this commission has been here, that we have heard from the village manager that there was an issue of how the compliance board was operating. What we have had are numerous cancellations from code compliance hearings. What we have had is residents coming before us that have been incorrectly cited. What we have had is a lack of compliance oversight, timeliness, all of these, but none of them due to the hearings that we've had. There have been residents and property owners who may not have been satisfied with our outcome or our rendering, but none of them have taken it any further. And we haven't had any feedback. So if there as far as coming to these commission meetings, I haven't been to many. Mainly I get up early in the morning. However, watching them, I give my due respect to the residents who come before you and are limited by what you are asking them to abide by. You can't do this. Coming tonight and just listening to the decorum of what we can and cannot do is unbelievable, unbelievably restrictive. To have an officer here to make sure that we I'm glad that you're bringing up change of leadership. I think one is due. I am completely dissatisfied with the commission as a whole. You've done nothing, and God forbid we ever get a driveway ordinance in place. Thank you.
Dan Keith.
Dan Keys, 1107 118th Street. Primarily want to talk about the memorandum of understanding with the city of North Miami. I've read through that, and I was shocked by the fact that the agreement is totally one-sided in favor of North Miami. They get to call all the shots. They have all the ways of controlling the situation. We have absolutely no guarantee that they're going to do anything that they have said they're responsible for in the agreement. We don't have recourse against North Miami, and we're not asking them for anything. Trim our trees. We're not saying how often. We're not saying how. And I really don't think you should approve that agreement. I honestly don't know why it's necessary, tell you the truth. We've been putting bushes in the median of 121st Street for 75 years. North Miami has had no problem with that. If we think we're going to get them to trim some trees, we should tell them how often we want them to trim the trees and to what quality level they should trim them. Okay, if a limb comes down in the street, are they going to cut it up? Ground. Reference 12A, there's really an awful lot in both 12A and 12B that are problematic. But with 12A, if you decide to pass the magistrate situation, I think that residents should have the opportunity to choose between a magistrate form of adjudication or the code board. Secondly, it allows the village to recover costs if they...
I'm sorry, could you just put on the mic? Thank you.
Doesn't it provide for residents to recover costs should they prevail? In section, this is a very specific thing, section 14.1.10, parentheses C, parentheses 1, line 7 of page 11 of 17, I believe that you left the word magistrate out of that line there. You're saying the code board is responsible for, but you're not saying the magistrate can do that. But yet the next section there indicates that the I'm out of time. I'd like to complain about the fact that we only have 3 minutes here. I spent 3 to 4 hours going through these documents, and honestly, it just isn't enough time to go.
Clerk, can you start the clock at the beginning? Thank you. Chuck Ross, 1166 Griffin Boulevard. I'd like to speak about the whistleblower proposed ordinance. This is a no-brainer for the village and its employees. It's important to provide a safe and non-threatening workplace, further to be competitive in the marketplace, as we can provide protection that most cities in Dade County so far don't offer. We can be the role model, create a place where employees are protected from retribution for doing the right. Thank you. Shame on any commissioner that does not support this ordinance. Whatever arguments you may have, fly in the face of transparency and making Biscayne Park a better place to be. There were issues in the past that may have come to light sooner if Biscayne Park had a whistleblower ordinance in place. Without this ordinance in place, a whistleblower needs to hire an attorney to sue to get their... I want to talk a little bit about the Citizens Independent Transportation Trust. That was good that we had them here tonight. I wish they had spoke a little bit about the audit. Unfortunately, Rox did a public records request, or we wouldn't have known that an audit was completed in December of 18 that showed that there's a substantial deficiency between what they think we have and what we actually have, and it's somewhere between $300,000 and $400,000. Unfortunately, at the last meeting that it was closer to $50,000 by the finance director, but I differ with those numbers. Because we got some additional money since this audit took place, that doesn't mean it's more money for us. That's more money we have to spend. They have a number of approximately $866,000. Our fund balance was $439,000 when this audit was completed. When I was looking at the audit, though, I noticed there were quite a number of projects that were performed during the 10-year audit, by the way. And they will probably to soak up most, if not all, of the differences, but somebody had to know enough to go look for them. It's not that they don't exist, the documents. You just have to know that they existed and look for them. I got 23 seconds. The biggest part of that whole project that really concerned me was our manager and possibly the mayor also knew we had a potential problem and did so this audit came out in December. He failed to respond to sit on a timely basis in writing. I suppose it sounded like he made some phone calls, but this is something this is a failure upon the manager to bring this to the attention of the commission, and it's a substantial amount of money. Thank you.
Good evening. David Raymond, 11520 Northeast 9th Avenue. A few things that I wanted to discuss tonight, and good evening, Commission, neighbors, staff. I think the biggest thing on here, and I did read through all of the items here, and there's quite a few items, so I know everybody here has spent time who's spoken tonight reviewing those as well. On 12B, the Commission procedures, I think I understand what you're doing, and I think I understand the reason.
I'm sorry, the mic again. Just hit the button. Yep. Nope.
Okay. So I think I understand the reasons for it after having been through many commission meetings here where things have sort of gotten out of control, and maybe on both sides of the table with people's emotions running a little bit awry. And I understand why you want to have these procedures in place, because if you have them in place, then you can get people to follow them. But I think it's also sort of like when you have one bad I think that the procedures that you're looking at tonight that have there's clearly more things on there for the residents to follow than for you guys. We didn't get elected. We're just here as residents. We didn't swear any oaths or anything. We're in here just trying to speak our minds, and I think a lot of that is overkill. But I think part of the reason for the overkill is that some people No? Yes? Okay, 2 for 1. So I think it's just it's difficult to have procedures like that, in place and expect that residents will even know what they are. There's pages and pages. We'd have to read up and study before we came to a commission meeting to know what we could and couldn't say. I think if there's just a way to put in there that, we should all be civil to each other, maybe that would be, one line and you could kind of get away with the whole thing. I've got them both on. I think is the legal procedures in terms of what we're doing with the attorney and the billing. I think that some of that, from what's been dug up, and I haven't seen it myself, if there's double billing, triple billing, that should be addressed. But I think it's also sort of the climate that's been created here has led to some of that. And I think that in the past, from things that I've seen and contracts that were passed, attorneys, so for people to compare those bills to these bills, I don't think that part is fair. But clearly things that shouldn't have been charged if those were, in fact, in there. Anyway, thank you. Good luck to the next speaker.
Turn off the left mic, please. Thank you.
I think this is the new trick to control residents' comments.
Can you stop the clock, please? All right. Thank you. Thank you. Go ahead.
Gary Kuehl, 777 Northeast 111th Street. Into the mic. All right. Let me know when I'm not allowed to talk. We talk about civility and divisiveness. And this commission has single-handedly created this atmosphere of divisiveness in the community. And the way the code board was maybe we should cut back on the attorney fees and spend it on microphones. Anyway, you know, Dale said he was on the Code Compliance Board for almost 20 years. Linda Dillon was on it for 12. I was on it for 7. And you have a city manager who occasionally used to come to a meeting and makes these false allegations, trumped up stuff about what the board was doing. I think we all had enough experience and enough time and a tremendously clean record. Just find that kind of treatment abhorrent and unfounded. And further than that, I don't know if I'm on or off. You know, you have a manager who never said a word, and has allowed this to happen and allowed.
Yes.
To conduct herself in a manner that was inappropriate, possibly unethical. There is no question that Mac and Dan were targeted. It's very evident. She gave testimony at a meeting which was a fabrication. I mean, they were given a violation. For not having a permit, even though she knew they had a permit, on something that was pulled 3 years before. I'm not really sour grapes. I thought about resigning from the Code Compliance Board many times. You're paying somebody a nice salary who has an assistant. I'll just write a letter. I mean, this is ridiculous. I can't talk like this.
I apologize. All the mics are the same way. I just asked for one.
Can I just talk loudly? I have a big enough
yes,
voice for people.
Please, thank you.
Anyway, you have a code compliance officer you're paying a nice salary to. She has an assistant. We have somebody working on the weekends doing additional. You've paid for a new car for her, although the truck still has air conditioning, it's still running, and it's still being used, so I don't even know why we need it this morning. I don't know why we need more than that. And what do we accomplish? We'll get what Elizabeth Panero left. How many items she brought the code compliance? And look at what was done, has been done lately, with the additional people that have been brought into it over the system. Okay, and supposedly was supposed to be 6 months to straighten out a file, set up a computerized system so things would be streamlined. It turned out to be a year of roughly gain from the absolute zero. Has there been any improvement? No. Are the records? Do we know when something's a second offense? Do we even seem to know if somebody pulled a permit or not? No. That's what's so discouraging, because that's why.
Okay, thank you. Next. Nobody else? Is there anybody else who wishes to speak for public comments? Dr. Jonas, go ahead.
Fred Jonas, 918 119th Street. A lot of people have made a lot of complaints. When I say a lot of people, I'm talking about our neighbors, your neighbors. They complained about a lot of things. They complained about the code officer. They complained about the attorney who's ripping us off. They complained about a lot of things. But I really think Gary Kuehl has identified the essential ingredient here, and that is that this commission doesn't care about anything. We have the same complaints month after month. Tracy writes notes to herself. Nobody cares. That's the
Forget just at your name and address, please.
Harry, 750 Northeast 117th Street. I'd like to address item 11A. That's the item that appears to be where this commission is reviewing the leadership of the mayor, and you want to get rid of the mayor for some reason. I submit that the commission does not have the authority. Legally, there's no provision in the charter for the commission to review the mayor.
I'm sorry, could you hit the mic again, please? Thank you.
If the purpose is to remove the mayor, you're off base. And I'm talking to you, Mr. Sumerian, because you're the sponsor of the resolution. There is nothing in the charter that authorizes such a move. If you want to proceed against the mayor or any other commissioner, follow the law, and there is provision for it. The only thing that the commission has the power designation of a commissioner. Other than that, you must follow state law. And state law, if you care to look at it, is contained in Chapter 100 of the state law, which governs recall of a elected official. I submit that that's, if your intention is to recall the mayor or any other commissioner, please follow the law and do not waste the taxpayers' money on politics, internal politics. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who'd like to speak before the commission? Okay, none had public comments are closed. Information updates. Madam Clerk, I believe that's your section.
We have a code compliance board vacancies, and Anton resigned from the code. So at this moment, we have no board member on the code compliance board.
Thank you for that update. Consent agenda. We're having the same problems up here. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Yeah, I just have one item that I want to...
Pull.
I'm sorry.
You want to pull an item?
Yeah, one item, workshop communication, September 24th, 2019. I just wanted to add an email that was sent by the city manager to the mayor and commissioners explaining why this workshop was not to take place. Just to have for transparency, we need to add the email that was sent to the commissioner and mayors for the reason why there was 4 commissioners did not come. Yes, sir? Yes.
We can just go ahead and pull that item. We can discuss it afterwards if that's okay. Is there a motion to accept the balance of the consent?
I have.
Yes.
Except the manager isn't here. Item 8C, this is the proposed memorandum of agreement with North Miami regarding the median. There are a few paragraphs that I would like to negotiate to be made reciprocal. So that's the only leeway I'd like in the resolution.
Then I'll pull, if it's no objection, I'm going to pull 8C as well. talk loud too and see if that works. If that's possible, I don't think so. All right. Is there any other items that need to be polled? None? Okay. So we're polling item, the workshop communication minutes, as well as...
Consent agenda.
Is there... Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Okay, polling first one. Commissioner Smary, you already made your statement. You would like to include the letter as to what happened for transparency.
Yes.
Attorney Rodriguez, any problem with that? I don't see one.
I don't see any problem.
Okay.
It's just to give the date, September 24, 2019, 11:44:25. That's where she can find it easy.
Perfect. Thank you.
Who sent the email just for the minutes?
Yes. Okay. It was sent by City Manager Christian Manis, and it was sent to all the commissioners and mayor and commissioners. Excuse me.
Go ahead and approve the minutes as amended for the workshop communication September 24th, adding the email from Mr. Manager Manners. Is there a motion to do that? Anybody?
I'll make a motion to accept the workshop communication minutes with the addition of the email.
Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Motion passes 4-0. Okay, for item 8C, that item has been polled. Is there any objection? We can go ahead and poll that and so that the issues with the tree, I was appreciative of Mr. Key's comments. I concur the issue on the trees is definitely vague and unclear.
Right.
So I would like, if there's a motion to go ahead and postpone that until the attorney can look at it and the manager can review it.
I make a motion to pull the item. That's where the attorney can look at it and add whatever stuff.
Is there a second?
And also, if we can look into what Dan Keys brought up. Yes.
Table the item until next meeting.
I make a motion to table the item to the next meeting.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor? Aye. 8C tabled. Okay. There's no resolution, so we're on discussion of mayor change of leadership by Dan Samayer. With that, I called the ethics board and spoke to the head of ethics, and at this point I must excuse myself from this because of Section D for the ethics board, so I'll be passing the gavel to Commissioner Samayer.
Yes.
Attorney?
Discussion, attorney, not attorney, excuse me. Could you talk about, since I got this, commission got it late, you explained why we got it late, and if you could just explain for the record what this letter is that the commission received?
This item was brought up in June, and the commission voted at that time to table the item to seek guidance from the state attorney general's office in the form of a legal advisory opinion. We promptly submitted the request, and I was working with a senior attorney in that office for 3 months regarding potentially applicable laws. The village's situation is your charter provides for an appointment procedure but not a removal procedure for your mayor. Florida statutes allow the governor to remove an elected official and for the state senate to suspend an elected official. There's no provision in the statutes regarding removal of a municipal position by a commission or a council, in your case a commission. So, excuse me. So the decision was made back in June to seek guidance from the state. Since there's no express written authority in the statute.
Turn on the mic, please. Sorry.
Afternoon, the state attorney general's office emailed me this around 2 p.m. So it's not included in the agenda materials, but I've requested that the clerk make it part of the minutes for this meeting, and each commission member has a printed opinion in front of them. Essentially, the state attorney general's office has elected to not issue an opinion on the matter and directed us to a case that they thought might be of some assistance, but they did not provide any I received it this afternoon, but I took a look at the case, and I've discussed it with some senior partners in my law firm, and that's the update on the Attorney General opinion.
Can you tell us what Johnson versus, since I haven't seen it, to make my comment, I need to know what Johnson did. Talking about this mic's going off. Okay, let's try it again. I'd like to know what Johnson, I just got this right now, so before I make my comments, I need to know what the Attorney General is saying in reference to Johnson versus Johnson. It doesn't tell me anything here.
To be clear, the Attorney General's not really telling us anything. They've politely suggested we look at this case, but their letter makes clear they're not weighing in. They're sitting this out. After 3 months of back and forth, there was a change in the wind on that, but we're not going to get into that. It's irrelevant for purposes of this conversation. So my immediate recommendation, if the commission wants a summary of legal authority, as I just got this opinion this afternoon, I would request two things. One, the commission first decide whether they feel this item needs to move forward, and then if it does, I would request an opportunity to provide the commission with a written legal opinion on Johnson versus Johansson, with the other authority that we found that we did discuss with this Attorney General's office during the past 3 months, to provide our recommendations and cautions regarding procedures. Because again, you don't have any express authority, but you potentially may have some inherent authority, but it has to be handled very, very carefully. Then there's due process issues there, and Johnson and Johansson does touch on that. So I think the measured thing to do, now that we have this letter as of this afternoon, is to, one, take a threshold vote as to whether this item will be proceeding, and if it is, allow us an opportunity to provide the commission with a written legal opinion and guidance.
I plan on going forward with this item.
Excuse me, Vice Mayor, point of order. You need to make a motion as to whether or not any of your other fellow commissioners would like to second your motion to open this for discussion.
Okay. I make a motion whether or not, I don't think I have to. If you have, could you explain that to me? That's possible. I don't think so. It's my agenda item.
Mayor stepped down. The presiding officer right now is Vice Mayor Samaria. Right. So you're the presiding officer for these proceedings on this item while the mayor's out. I don't know if you were aware of that. Are you aware of that? It wasn't announced when she left. Okay. So yes. So this item is up. It was approved during agenda approval. It's before the commission as an act. As it says, it's a discussion item. I think it's more of an action item in reading the memo, but as a threshold issue, I think you need to see if the commission wants to proceed substantively with it, and if so, I would respectfully request that the commission give us an opportunity, us being Gray Robinson, an opportunity to provide you with a very detailed procedural blueprint, because it is my interpretation that even though the State Attorney General's office did not formally weigh in on this, Johnson and Johansson provides some pretty suggestive notice, opportunity to be heard guidelines, and if this proceeds today, it's my opinion that we wouldn't be following that.
Commissioners that want to make a motion to go forward with this.
I don't think we need to make a motion to go forward with it. It was approved during the agenda approval.
Right.
It's only a discussion. It's a discussion item.
Right.
So you want to go? I got the letter this afternoon, and I've been trying to look over a little bit about Johnson versus Johansson, the case that's referenced in here. It looks like it may be a little bit more on point about what, in our situation, This has to do about removing a councilman who was president of the council of the city of Jacksonville. They were seeking to remove him from that position. The state weighed in that, of course, that he couldn't be removed from an elected position, but they were talking about removing him just from that office. However, since this just came in this evening, we haven't really had a chance to. I haven't had a chance really to go through the case to get a better understanding of it. But it looks like this case may actually benefit us greatly on this issue. In a bigger picture setting, it's a good thing that we had a discussion about setting up a charter review advisory board, because our charter is very specific about identifying how we're to appoint the mayor. However, for whatever reason, no one thought about adding that additional step of what do you do to remove that person from that position. I think this is going to be one of those issues that is probably going to be better served to have it as to put before the voters as a charter amendment. I note, looking at our charter, we talk about the appointment of the manager and the attorney, and we then specifically discuss the removal of the manager and attorney. So to me, it appears that we were a little short-sighted in the past by not adding that additional language in the charter that says once you appoint somebody, this is how you get rid of somebody from that position if need be. Absent having some type of charter language or some type of legislation that we can kind of hang our hat on about how to do this, I don't know until I finish with the Johnson versus Johansson case. I don't know how we could move forward with the final outcome of having a vote. We can definitely have a discussion. You can definitely have a discussion. We can on the matter, but I think that's all that we're going to be able to do at this time is have a discussion on the matter. I don't think there can be any action that can be taken until we have a chance to go through this case that was presented today.
Thank you, Commissioner Tudor. I second what you've said. In the absence of a documented process to do this, we're exposing ourselves to liability and violating our own charter by going forward and taking an action item. Further violating the due process of the mayor, not giving her an opportunity to prepare or defend herself, and the recommendation, the memo itself, has no backup, just a vague statement about overstepping. There's no specific incident cited, no facts, no dates, no times for us to consider. And because the accusation addresses overstepping into the manager's duties, the absence of the manager, I think, makes this a challenging topic to discuss in a fair and productive way. And for those reasons, I will abstain from wading any further into the subject matter of this discussion.
I don't think you would need a motion for that.
This was the discussion.
Yeah, I think we're having. And that was my intent. That we're having discussion. I was pointing out that I fully support that the village should have something in place for the removal of a commissioner from a position that they're placed in by the rest of the commission. I think we have to have something there. We don't have that right now, so I'm not sure how we would actually. If somebody's intentions is to remove somebody at this point, I don't know how we could do that with what we currently or what we don't have on the books currently. We should have something on the books. There needs to be something there. It makes no sense that you can put somebody into a position, but you have no language about removing that person. So there needs to be something there. I think at this point, we can have we can have a discussion. I just don't think that I'm not saying this is your intention. I don't think that there's anything that we at this point, but I think this is what we're having right now is a discussion on this item of yours.
We're not actually discussing the actual item. We're just discussing whether or not. I'm not hearing anybody. My question is the rest of my fellow commissioners are going to want to have an actual discussion on change of leadership. It doesn't mean we can't do the change of leadership, but I want to have a discussion on it. Now, if everybody's making an assumption that we want to wait until we get better results for that Johnson & Johnson, I'm willing to move it to the next commission. But this has been going on for 4 months now. We need to have a discussion. And it seems like my fellow commissioners seems to be avoiding that discussion.
This is your discussion item, so are you asking us to respond to your question? Do we want to have a discussion about it?
We're going to have a discussion. So we are going to have this discussion whether or not the fellow commissioners are going to try to avoid it. What I'm trying to do is we need to respond on whether or not. Now, I'm willing to move this for the next commission in reference to looking up Johnson & Johnson. Because I just got this. I don't want to make myself look like a fool if it turns out something that says I can't do it. But we need to have a discussion about change of leadership. I don't know why this commission, for some reason, is not going to want to hold, even if you're not going to remove her from the leadership from there. We do need to have a discussion on this subject.
I think that is your opinion, Vice Mayor Samaria, an opinion that I do not share. So I have nothing further to discuss. I think that this is a political matter. And nothing in your discussion memo cites any particular instance that raises any concern in me. And without something to go forward on, I have nothing to discuss. And without offering the parties an opportunity to prepare, and without the manager here to speak to his domain and whether or not he feels that the intrusions you are alleging actually occurred, I think we are tilting.
Just for the record, as a commissioner sitting up here, I think I've said it a couple of different ways now. This is your item. It's your. Have a discussion. If you want to begin your discussion on the item, I'm not going to stop you from having your discussion on the item. You seem to indicate that somehow the rest of the commission up here, which I'm one of those commissioners, I'm not trying to stop you from having your discussion. But that's one commissioner. This is your item. You're free to have your discussion. All I'm just but actually going forward with an action, we can't really do. But I think we need to have a discussion about how the commission handles changes in leadership, because we need to have something in place for that. So, please, this is your item. Please, present what you want to present.
Because I think there's it sounds like there's some miscommunication or something up here, but are you trying to have the discussion right now as to why you feel the commission should pursue an action item, or are you trying to have an action item now? Do you understand the distinction?
I want clarification on the motion, please.
Yes, please.
Yes.
Well, there's no motion. There's no motion. The item is here. Could the commission approve this agenda? So, to clarify what is before the commission currently, are you trying to take action right now, or are you trying to present to the commission a discussion about why you feel we should explore action in the future? Because I think that's what Commissioner Tudor is saying. Is this a conversation about macro level, there should be a removal procedure in place in the charter, big picture, or is this about the mayor, the current sitting mayor, and removing the current sitting mayor today?
Turn the mic on, please.
commission, I think we need a change of leadership. And I want to have if we're not going to have a discussion on removing a change of leadership, we need to have a discussion on, I believe, items that's in my backup. For Commissioner Weiss to say there's nothing in my backup, I don't know what she's looking at. But there is stuff in my backup. And I want to have an open discussion on change of leadership. I mean, we're having so much problems in this community between the residents and the commission. And we have had the same residents participate in this community over the years. And there has to be a reason why all of a sudden we're having these problems. And I want to have an open discussion. And this is all I've been asking from the beginning. This is going on almost 5 months now. And it seems like everybody says this is political. This is not political. I was elected to represent the residents, and I feel that we need a change of leadership. As before the election, I brought it to the attention of the mayor when she was there. And I expressed that she was a lightning rod of this village, and that she needed to tone it down and needed to work better with the relationship with the residents. She agreed at the time, and now it just doesn't seem we're having too much problems. And I think with change of leadership, basically, change of leadership is to go in a different direction. I'm not trying to remove her from office. I'm trying to have it where we have an open discussion on what I believe is being committed or done by this mayor, and I want to have an open discussion about it. I mean, if I have a discussion now and I won't be able to, if nothing's going to be done, then it's better to wait until we look at the Johnson & Johnson. I need to see it myself. Well, that's what I'm saying.
To take action beyond a general discussion, which it sounds like you are, then I think the prudent thing to do would be for me to provide the commission with an advisory opinion explaining Johnson versus Johansson and some other cases that we found, so that the commission does not make a misstep. Because here's what's happened. The mayor has continually asserted certain legal objections to this commission and put us on notice that she has due process concerns about your memo and about the commission's authority to proceed. It is my legal recommendation to this commission that you provide us with an opportunity to first give you a legal memo about the recommended procedure and authority that you should proceed with or not proceed with. There's substantive due process issues here. There's a property right interest here. As de minimis as it is, the mayor does make more money than everyone else on this commission because of that title. It's not an empty title.
There's guidance as to how to proceed because it does, just remain the inherent authority if you have the authority to appoint
it's okay with the commission. I don't have a problem. I'll go, my goal is to, to have this discussion and to do what's right for the community. So I have no problem with what the attorney said, and I'm willing to move the item to the November meeting. That's okay with the rest of the commission. That's the motion I'm making, to move the item to move the item to November.
Don't think we can revisit this in November without the opinion that Attorney Rodriguez was speaking of. Are you suggesting that the village spend more on legal fees to pursue this matter in the form of an opinion?
Excuse me?
No, this is one of the things that is causing our legal fees to be excessive. Is the research behind these petty political issues. So if you would like her to proceed, you should make a motion to do so and see if you have a second.
To, I guess, table this to the November commission meeting?
Commissioner Tudor, we can't do that without Attorney Rodriguez doing the research and offering us a legal opinion on the applicable case law so that we can have a discussion that doesn't expose this commission to any further liability and that allows Mayor Trutman her rights of due process.
I'm supposed to take on that legal work in the first place.
Yeah. That there is going to be legal fees that are incurred, and that shouldn't be anything that stops us from doing the business of the people. The only thing I would ask is that when this item comes back for the November commission meeting, I would like some additional details about the specific allegations, because the only thing that was attached to tonight's package was just your memo, and in the background it doesn't really give any real details. It just talks about village residents have repeatedly appeared before the commission about expressing concerns over the role the mayor has adopted. I would like to get a little bit more detail about some specific. Okay, now with that understanding, I have no problem. I move this to the November commission meeting with the understanding that we'll have additional background and we'll have some guidance from the attorney. Aye.
Nay.
Village Attorney invoices and future roles, introduced by Commissioner Samaria. I'm going to go ahead.
Okay. Your financial benefit or detriment to our law firm. The call to action in the memo states as such. Accordingly, on this specific item, and I provided this memo to the commission before on this item, we are conflicted out of advising the village commission on item 11B. So I will step down from the dais so you can have this discussion, and I'll just sit over there, and when you're done, I'll come back up for the next item.
Thank you. Joel, one moment, please.
I think we have to have if I'm going to be if we're going to be having a discussion in reference to attorney fees, there has to be somebody from legal here to answer that. I mean, to represent the village. Okay.
Oh, to represent the village.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So, no, I'm sorry. Continue what you were saying. I'm sorry, I misunderstood, sir. Commissioners want to speak to this item?
As I said at a previous meeting where this item was raised, I have had an opportunity to speak directly to our council and to ask questions about these billings, and I was convinced that there is not an issue. So I have nothing further to say on the matter.
Thank you. Commissioner Tudor? I don't know. I don't think so. Apparently.
Try this again. I think this is definitely a discussion item the commission needs to have. There had been looking at the legal fees. There has been an uptick in legal fees during certain months. I think part of that has to do with the fact that I think the commission needs to have specific guidance for themselves about how we should be conducting our time with the attorney. There's been some of the charges are billing for some of the months where it seems like it may be multiple, the possibility of multiple commissioners reach out to the attorney for possibly the same type of issues when we may want to have, similar to the manager's update, a weekly update at one time, so that there's no one commissioner who is repeatedly using attorney time. I understand that there are some concerns earlier on with the billing, and I mentioned this when this item first came up, that according to the contract, it talks about that the
It's on, and you're good.
village would not be charged for additional attorneys if it was for basically the benefit of the law firm. So I think we need to, I wish the manager was here to have a discussion with him to find out, was the firm directed for multiple attorneys to be engaged? That's the case. Better oversight of the legal fees. So I completely support having this discussion and moving forward with it. It's not just one specific issue. There's multiple issues and it's not just the bad guy in this situation isn't just the make it out. It's also there's responsibility on the administration and on the commission as well for these uptick in legal fees.
Commissioner Tudor, I entirely agree, and I think if this were a conversation around how we might better conduct business on our end of things so that we make the most efficient and economic use of our legal support, I think that's a discussion worth having. But I think we've received some pretty stellar representation since this new team has come on, and I did practice law and know the ins and outs of billing, and I know a padded bill when I see one, and I understand that there are different attorneys who serve us at Gray Robinson with different levels of expertise, so that we will not always have one attorney whose expertise is sufficient for a given matter that we have placed in front of Gray Robinson. With that said, I think if we are widening the scope of conversation to discuss our part of the problem, I think that's entirely warranted. But to Nope. Okay. To put Gray Robinson on trial, as it were, when I'm not sure. I might be the only person on this dais who's actually discussed the bill. Has anyone else?
I have. Hold on, please. One person. I have discussed the bill at great length about specific charges that were characterized, and they were completely mischaracterized based upon my conversations with the attorney regarding double, triple billing and things like that. Was not accurate at all. I spent time going through them at no charge. I wanted to say that out loud. No charge was issued to that. So my problem is the way that the specific item was put forth. Violates the charter. There's a procedure for moving an attorney, which is the same procedure for moving a manager. So if we do this, what we're doing and putting the attorney on trial, essentially you're trying to remove a charter officer, and there's a whole legal process, and if you've read the charter, you'll know that. Second, we signed a contract that does have very specific things about 30 days, and when you sign a bill and you sign a contract, you have to abide by that contract. That is the law. Regarding review charges that were characterized, they're completely mischaracterized and they're inaccurate. Third is, why is a resident presenting themselves as the expert as to what's going on regarding those bills? The only person who can do that is the attorney, and the attorney has done that with the commissioners that have asked us to do so. Finally, fourth, are we really cost of having another attorney to sit on this to talk about a budget? So by the time you hire another attorney to sit with us and argue over the bills and put to a process and make it into basically a firing of an attorney, when I personally know from what I've been presented that the bills don't have an accuracy to them, and know where we're triple billed and know where we billed by different attorneys for different items, that's not the same thing as triple billing by the same attorney. It's just a mischaracterization. I think sitting here having to do this, when we're talking about attorneys' bills, I think the only thing that I really would support is if the attorney would let us know. I agree completely with what Commissioner Tudor said, Commissioner Wise said regarding making sure what we do to make sure we minimize our bills, and that includes me in that. But I do think that it would also be helpful to have a heads up billing. There's one other thing I want to make a point, and that is you're comparing apples and oranges. We had an attorney represent us for many years for $155 an hour. I don't know any city I know that has that billing rate. We're being charged $225 an hour, which also, by current standards, is not considered a high rate. Part of my is to discuss why some of this is occurring. There are reasons why we are having more legal issues affecting the village. Some of them are public knowledge, police, and when one of the residents criticized the chief of police for trying to come up with a social media policy or anything else that's required, just because we didn't do it well before doesn't mean we shouldn't be. And that costs money. The idea somehow that you're comparing what happened in the past to what's happening now, you didn't have the same amount legal concerns that we're having now, including a Cat 5 storm that came and then having to go through FEMA because they just won't pay 200 cities. So there's a lot of reasons why these things are occurring. It's not that somebody's double billing, triple billing, or doing things that are not in keeping with what the village has to have done. So from that perspective, I said it before and I'll say it again. I think moving forward, I think we need to figure out how to get our costs down. I agree with that. Finding methods to do that, I concur with you on that. Vice Mayor.
I think we've been overdue. And I think we need to have, and one of the commissioners for a second, and I hope, everything's okay with Commissioner Jenny Zadell. Not the last commission meeting because she wasn't here, but the meeting before that. She had a major concern with this billing. And she is an attorney. And I think that we definitely need to have a discussion on it. I'll give you a perfect example. Emails that are sent, that the residents are sent, the attorney should have sent it right back to the city manager and have the city manager response, not her response. And just alone in June we had emails, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 billings for emails that came out to a total of $337.50. We had the mayor who met in a total of 5 times for 5.66 hours, which is $1,390. A mayor has a right to have a conversation with the attorney, but if legal advice is, the commission is supposed to get the same legal advice that she gets, and we don't seem to be getting that. The itemized on the bill should be much better than it is, and it's not. And I really do believe we're up in over bill. Just alone in August, we had an Attorney General's response, and I had two different attorneys charge us for the same response. We didn't go into the Attorney General's office. I don't understand how that. There's a lot more that I want to go into it. But one of the commissioners that had a big concern about it is not here. This is the second time that she's not here for that. I think that we need to have a serious discussion about this bill.
May I? I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I like to have it. So if should have made a motion at the beginning to, like I did the last time, to pull this item because I definitely need to hear from Commissioner Jenny Sandell, who had a problem with this billing, and she's the expert out of all the people up here, is the expert on how this billing. I do have major concerns with this billing. I can go line by line by line on. That's what the commission wants to do. And to do it.
Since there's a lot of legal issues associated with this, I'm going to make a motion that we discuss, because I'm just going to do a polling. Commissioner Tuda, did you speak with the attorney and go over the items that were of concern?
I spoke to her about most of the items that were on here. I've had discussions with her and the manager about.
Okay. Did you? I did. Did you? Okay. So you're bringing in item 4. I'm trying. The problem I have is we're playing a lot of this where you won't talk to the attorney, you won't meet with the attorney, you won't sit, let me finish and please don't interrupt. You won't meet with the attorney, you won't meet with the manager about these things. At the end of the day, you're bringing forth an item for which you don't have any knowledge of. And the problem I have is this is at a cost to the taxpayers. And it's fiscally friendly. You talk about fiscal transparency. But if you're not you have a thing where you just don't want to talk to this attorney for whatever your reasons are on multiple matters. So my issue is we're sitting here now having an item for which you have no knowledge of what's going on with the bills. Instead, you take a resident's viewpoint because the letter that you have is identical to the letter from... And I'm going to turn the floor over. It's an identical letter that she wrote. And it's not so it's her analysis that you're putting forth, not anybody else's. And you're not meeting with the attorney. To me, that's irresponsible.
First off, when we get an attorney bill, it's supposed to be self-explanatory. It tells exactly what you're charging us for. It says it right there. I don't need to sit down and say, okay, what are you charging about this? It tells you this is self-explanatory. That's what the attorney bills are supposed to be. And whether or not I met with Ms. Ross, it would be irresponsible of me not to talk to somebody in legal that knows about bills. And I have spoken to other people that looked at it and said that this bill should be itemized. If you have where you're meeting with the mayor, you're mixing something else. If you call the Attorney General's office, most billing tells you how long who you talk to, the person that you talk to, the amount of time you spoke to them. And you have to give a better itemize of what these bills are. And that's what I'm going by. I'm going by what this says here. Email to County Ethics Commission regarding coordinated continued ethics education for officials, specific ethics training as a citizen advisor. That's self-explanatory. It could be better, but it's not. It's just, I don't have to speak to this attorney. I can go to other attorneys and talk to them at my dime and basically get the same advice. Hers is legal. The itemizing here, as I brought up the first time when we hired this attorney, I said that we were going to be billed by 3 different attorneys. Even Commissioner Jenny Sardella said that we were told, and she had concerns at the last time that she was here when this item was brought up. She had major concerns, and she's an attorney. And I think we need to have a serious discussion. I think we're being overbilled. And I think that we need to have whether or not we need to be reimbursed for it. We signed a contract for $75,000. We gave an extra $15,000. We are over. We're going to be over, close by the time this is over more than $120,000. And to blame it on the accusation that's going on, as one commissioner up here has said, of course, Commissioner Sumari is bringing up all of these items. No, I'm doing my job as a commissioner and bringing to attention items that are not being done. This bill is not correct. I'm not the only one that has a concern with this bill. Truthfully, most of you commissioners have not read this. The last time I brought this up, most of you commissioners didn't even read the June bill until it was brought to the attention by the city manager, and former Mayor Loxley brought it to Jenny Zardell, and she looked at it right on Mr. Darius and had a major concern. So for me to say that I question whether or not this bill is wrong, then, she can have the opportunity to explain it, but I don't have to. Everybody seems to make a thing that if I don't meet with the city manager, then I must not be doing my job. I can do my own, I do my research, I do my homework. I meet with residents that have an authority on this. If I don't meet with a resident, I'm not doing my job. That's my job, to meet and get opinions from. Yes, I have done to Commissioner Ross, and yes, I've used it because she has done her homework and she knows what she's talking about. I'm not an attorney.
Neither is she. She's a paralegal. She doesn't do attorney billing, and I'm not trying to be disrespectful to
This commission, I'm not finished. Please let me talk.
Go ahead. Let me know when you're finished.
Why do you have to do that, Commissioner?
Because both of y'all are fighting like cats and dogs, and we're not getting anything accomplished. This needs to be looked at. I agree with Vice Mayor Samaria. It looks like you've already did the analysis from your memo. You were very in depth with, detailed in your analysis. So my frustration is this is an item that needs to be discussed. We need to figure out the best course of action to do that. I would like to see Commissioner Johnson Sardella here to get her input as well. Would be nice. But if you really want to take the politics out of it, then the village should be looking at having a third party analyze these attorney bills to identify discrepancies, inaccuracies, and the like. Because it feels like that this is a valid discussion to have, but there's an unnecessary tug-of-war going on here that is not allowing this work to get done. So I do agree with Vice Mayor Samaria and Commissioner Johnson Sardella that the attorney bills need to be looked at in more detail. However, I think that would be better suited. have a third party, an independent third party, look over the billing, come back with a report on that. I'd feel more comfortable hearing that from them because, unfortunately, I don't have a lot of faith in the back and forth that's going on up here on the dais. I feel that this is being way.
Okay, just a moment, please.
No, let's stop.
No, you have to ask to be recognized. That is part of the process. Yes, sir. You may be recognized.
Yes.
Go ahead.
When I bring up items, everything is political. It's not political. I have questions about the bill, and I have no problem with Commissioner Tudor's idea of having a third party. But yeah, I have no problem with doing that. But I think we need, if I really want to have, if we're going to do anything, I want to have an audit of this billing, and I have no problem with that.
Can we know what, I'm sorry, Madam Mayor, if I may, it would be nice to know in advance what the cost associated with that audit of the bill would be. This is your discussion item, Commissioner Samaria, so if you'd like to bring this up again, please come to us with an impartial third party who is going to review this and let us know what the costs are so that we can agree as a commission to those costs before they're expended, and then by what process the legitimacy of these billings will be vetted so that Gray Robinson may come prepared to speak to any questions that might be raised as a result of that audit.
And there's another side to this, which is the charter. It's the thing that we have.
If I may, Madam Mayor, I don't think the issue. I mean, I think there are two steps here. We're reviewing a bill, and I mean, Commissioner Samaria, correct me if I'm wrong, but you want to A, review the bill, and B, speak about replacing our council. B is something that we cannot just do up here on the dais. But A, we can, and as Commissioner Tudor said, it's a healthy conversation to have. But if we are going to have some sort of forensic analysis of the bill, we should know the costs associated and the exact items with which you take an issue and why. In your yes, and in your own words, so that you can be prepared to speak to that.
And I apologize for interrupting. What I was trying to interject, and I apologize for that, is, and you are correct, sir, in writing, because the contract states in writing 30 days. And what bothers me is you signed all the bills. Why didn't you bring it up when you signed them? If you're going to sign a bill, sir, if you're going to sign the check, which you did, on several of the checks, you signed the checks. And you signed the checks and you reviewed the bills. You didn't have to sign the check. You could have brought it up then in writing to the attorney, which is what the contract says. Do I have to read the contract? The contract's in here as backup. Tells you right there, 30 days. And I'm not... what I find incredible here is, and I still will say this, is that we're sitting here arguing about $8,000 or $4,000 or whatever the amount is. No. I think the problem is here is instead of sitting here meeting what some of these bills are, okay, you want to put everything on trial. I looked through our history here of how we voted, sir. And this isn't two people bickering. But if you look, 11 out of the almost every single bill, 95% of what you voted on in these minutes will show you voted against the commission.
No, it's yeah. Yep.
This is about it got you, and you have an issue with this attorney for whatever reason. And I'm sorry, but I don't agree with you that if you would spend the time to meet with the attorney and find out what the billing was about, then maybe we wouldn't have this discussion at all. It's the same issue, and it's the same issue when we went. When we had 180,000 or so over on the project, nobody yelled and screamed about the fact we didn't look at those bills. But now we're fighting over anywhere from $4,000 to $8,000. I think some of this is a little bit, not a little, this is very political. And it is not about moving our village forward. And thus is my objection. And I'll let you close, sir. And then make a motion if you want to make a motion.
First off, to make it sound like I signed a lot of checks, I signed like 3 or 4.
5 checks, and in reference to the attorney, and I did bring it up to the city manager. So I don't know where you're getting the information that I haven't brought it up. I brought up all my concerns about the city manager, to the city manager. And second off, billing. Everybody here pays bills. If a law firm charges me with this and without giving me an explanation on the billing, I have a problem with this. And you should be wanting to have a discussion. There is nothing political here about this. Every single item I bring up, everything is political. But when you guys bring up an item, it's not political. I have not voted in the letter. We can't accomplish anything as a commission. Every single time we have had workshops, they have not been brought forward. We have a communication workshop. One of the items you have here is a procedure workshop. Okay? That's 2 weeks later. We had a construction workshop which you brought up, which I thought was a good agenda item, and I had my swear. We have not brought it back 5 months later. So every time we have a workshop, we don't seem to be bringing anything back. So to say that I voted against a lot of stuff is just procedure stuff, but there's nothing major that we have accomplished, because we haven't accomplished anything with the commission. And this is not political. I have a question about the bill. I can sit up here and be like the rest of the commissioners and accept everything that she's going to charge. This is as a resident, this is my money she's spending. And when I go to the city manager and I say that one of the residents went to the bar association on this law firm, and the attorney charged us to represent her, and the city manager said, no, it's not in it, and I showed him in the bill where it is. That's a problem. And the person meeting with ethics with a commissioner and charged us. She doesn't represent Commissioner Jenny Sartell. She represents the village. She should have been no reason why she was up there talking. She basically was representing.
Madam Mayor, I'm sorry. I don't mean to interrupt you. Commissioner Samari, I'd like to protect you from disclosing privileged information on the dais. Conversations between any commissioner and our attorney are privileged. So please make all the points you want, but do not name individual commissioners when you do so. I'm just trying to protect you, sir.
You're not trying to protect me. It's in the billing, and it says she met with Commissioner Jenny Sartell and the ethics. Look in the June billing if you really looked at it.
I apologize, Commissioner Samari. You were on a tear. I just wanted to make sure that you didn't disclose the content of any of those discussions.
I know better than that. I repeated what's in the billing. The billing says she went up there with the city manager and Commissioner Jenny Sartell and met with ethics and charged us. She doesn't represent Commissioner Jenny Sartell. That's a statement I am making. She billed us.
May I repeat just one thing, and then I'm going to ask us to go ahead and make a motion one way or the other, what you want to do. But at the end of the day, if you don't meet with the attorney to ask about what that line meant, just because it's a sentence in English, you don't know what went on that necessarily, and that is sometimes has to be done, and anybody who's been on the commission knows this. You don't always disclose confidential information inside of a bill. So we're sitting up here without an attorney, arguing over the attorney that you've never met with on the bill, okay, and said you expressed it to the manager, but then you never made a phone call. I think that's the only person up here who hasn't met. And I'm not allowed to ask the attorney anything because she cannot represent me in this, but us in this. But I would suspect that since that meeting, I'm going to guess that Commissioner Johnson-Sardello has spoken with her. I don't know. But I'm going to ask right now if there's a motion on the floor, because if there's a motion on the floor, make it.
There's a motion on the floor that I want to...
Motion I am making is that I want
this commission to go over this bill thoroughly. And if it means, and I agree with Commissioner Tudor, to have a third outside person. To say that I have to come back with the cost, it's kind of funny on how some of the members of this commission is questioning fees, questioning spending money when they didn't question spending money in other items. We need to have an audit done on this and go over thoroughly on what each of these items are. It should be itemized. That's how all law firms do it.
Okay, are you planning, and this is what I'm asking you, this is an important question here. We just passed a budget. Where's the money going to come from?
And excuse me, Madam Mayor, but As in your cover memorandum where you request this discussion item, there is a line that says costs. So it is your responsibility to produce the costs associated with any discussion or review that you'd like this commission to have. I'm not asking for anything special. We all are obligated to do that when we bring things before the commission.
How are you going to question whether or not this bill is correct or not? If we're not entitled to any reimbursement, then we're not entitled to any reimbursement. This bill does not explain it thoroughly on how this money was spent. I think it's the responsibility of the city manager. Actually, when I asked the city manager, have you looked at this bill thoroughly? And he says, I'm okay with the bill. Well, he's okay spending my money, and as a resident, I'm speaking as a resident, spending our money and don't even know what's in the bill. All I'm asking is to have an honest discussion, and one of the commissioners that is not here had a serious concern about this bill. That's what I want to have. I want to have a serious discussion about this bill.
Okay,
That's all I'm asking.
So make a motion. Sir, if you have a motion on the floor, please make it.
Okay, I make a motion that we have discussion, thorough discussions, having somebody look at these bills to be sure that it is correct.
So you're proposing, I just want to make sure I have the motion correct. You're making a motion that we hire an outside party to review these bills at an unknown cost. I just want to make sure I'm correct, all right? Make sure I don't want to misspeak. And you're asking the city manager who's not here to do that, to hire a contractor to audit the bills. And could you please be specific as to which bills you want audited?
Well, if the city manager did his job and checked the bills thoroughly, as he should have been doing, since he's the one that's responsible for our bills, yes.
This is a point of order. You have a motion on the floor. I'm asking you to clarify the motion. What bills? I'm trying to make sure we have a motion that we can vote on.
At the bill, to be sure.
So from the time they started to the time they ended?
From the time that we...
Give me a date, please, sir.
The time that we hired them, when we signed a contract with them, what was that, February?
So back to John Herron's bills as well?
Huh?
When we signed a contract, it was under John Herron, so you want to do John Herron's bills, correct? All the way from the time we hired Gray Robinson till the end. Is that the motion on the floor?
No, I want it from the time that they took over. John Herron's bill was not as bad as this one is. Okay? He did... Just the perfect example for the email.
Sir, I just want, we have a motion on the floor. I'm asking you to please make a motion on the floor.
I just made the motion. How many times do you want me to repeat it? I just told
I'm asking you let me just clarify and make sure I understand. Your motion on the floor is that you want to have an auditor hired externally to audit the bills from the time that John Herron left till present. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Is there a second for that motion?
The motion is to hire.
He has a motion to hire an external, some sort of investigator or auditor, I guess a financial auditor, to audit the attorney's bills from the time Gray Robinson got on with the new change after John Herron to present. And is there a second for that motion? That's it. Is there a second?
Is there anybody can make a suggestion? If you don't want to...
Sir, please, the point of order. We have a motion on the floor.
I can't support that motion, but I have a similar motion that I'll make if this one fails.
Okay. Is there anybody else who wishes to second it? Motion fails.
I make a motion that the commission task the manager to affect the commission with the cost and a plan for auditing the attorney billing, and I would argue from when we brought Gray Robinson on, because you want to have two different time periods or two different set of attorneys that you can have that look and follow a pattern. You can't just do it with just since they came on. You want to kind of establish this pattern. So I would make the recommendation that the commission direct the manager to identify the costs associated with bringing in a third party to audit the attorney billing.
So your motion is to find the cost first before?
Yeah, the first step should be identifying the cost, because you don't want to just go straight to hiring, and if it comes back into something completely astronomical, it doesn't make sense when you look at
is there
saving.
But you're saying so basically there's an $8,000 outage, and your point is that it has to be within reason so that it's not exorbitant, correct?
I got 4 of them over here. I mean, yeah, because that's the whole thing is you got to look at what the potential savings are going to be. If the savings are, and I'm going to throw a number out here, and I'm not saying this is a savings, so no one, put me to this. But if we're looking at potential savings of, $20,000, I'm not saying that's that. I'm just throwing out a large number. If it's 20, you want to make sure that, and then the cost of having an outside auditor come in, review those fees are $5,000, then it makes more sense to do it in that sense. But that's why I'm saying the first step should be to make the motion to have the commission direct the manager to identify an auditor and the costs associated with conducting that audit, bring it back to the commission so then we can have that discussion.
I'll make Is there a second for that? I'll make because that's basically what I was trying to say. Thank you.
So that's a second?
So I'll make a second for that. yes.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Nay.
Nay.
Motion fails 2-2 because there's not a majority. Is there anything else on this item, sir?
Well, then, and if we're not, then I like to have it to where make a motion to move this item over to November, and where Commissioner Jenny Sardello, who had a problem with this billing, will be here to have an open discussion. So I would like to move it to there.
So the motion failed, and you're suggesting that we need to bring the motion back again?
Yep.
You can bring it back. At this point, there's nothing in our process right now that prevents you from doing motions over and over again. So you have that right. So you can't table it because it's already been ruled on, but you can bring it back if you wish to. Okay. If I'm not mistaken, because the attorney can't talk about this, it would be the same way where you would ask for a reconsideration for that item. Okay. Because the motion failed, you'd have to ask them to reconsider that. All right. Thank you, sir. Okay, but you have to, at the beginning, ask for reconsideration. All right, under new business, I'm sorry, Attorney Rodriguez, could you come back? Thank you. What time is it?
9:15.
Thank you.
11A, 12A.
No, we're just getting there now. I didn't skip anything, sir. Okay. We're in discussion of draft ordinance regarding special magistrate. I'd like the attorney to go ahead and start off on this one, if you would, please.
Thank you. Sorry, Mayor. Which item are we on? What number?
Special magistrate. 12A, discussion of draft ordinance regarding special magistrate.
Thank you.
I'll let you go ahead and lead off on it since...
So this was the manager's item?
Unfortunately, he's not here, yes.
Can you hear me? Okay, thank you. The manager presented at the last commission meeting a memo regarding exploring adding a special magistrate to the code to preside over code enforcement proceedings for the village. And I think he obtained some quotes just to give a ballpark for preliminary discussion. And at the close of that meeting, the commission directed me to take a look at the existing code enforcement sections and provide the commission with for discussion, not for first read, but for a discussion about adding a special magistrate with the code board to those provisions. So that's what this is. But after hearing the village clerk's update, it's my understanding that there is no quorum for the code board currently. In fact, it's completely vacant. I don't know if there's been any applications to fill those seats because it's a pretty recent development. Village clerk.
Are there any... pass the mic.
Sorry?
Are there any applicants for the vacancies of the seats for the code board?
Not currently, no.
Okay.
There was one that he withdrew.
So in light of that, I don't know if that affects this discussion. I don't know if the manager not being present when it was really something the manager first proposed to the commission changes the discussion, but this is what the commission asked me to draft.
Can you put the mic a little closer? Thank you.
This is what the commission asked me to draft, so this is just for discussion of a working draft of the potential revisions if the commission wants to pursue this with a first read and a second read.
Okay, just to move it along a little bit, I'm going to start on this side, go to that side, and I'll end. Commissioner Wise.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's my position that in the absence of the manager whose item this is and the lack of an existing code board at this time, that we should move this over to November's meeting.
Okay. Vice Mayor.
Since the city manager, I have no problem with moving this over to November.
Okay. There's no motion right now. It's just a discussion. My only concern with November, and I know he's still flipping pages, but if you want to go ahead, so you can, then I'll comment afterwards.
No, I think it's better to move this to when the village manager, this was his item. There's probably going to be some detail that he's going to be able to provide when staff has questions, or when the commission has questions on it. So I would make a motion that we table this to the November commission meeting when the manager's here.
If I may comment first, and then go ahead, and if you'd make that motion afterwards, if that would be okay?
No, okay, that'd be okay.
Thank you. The only concern I have is timeline, and I'd like to help just get clarification from the commission. Since we do not have a code board at all, do we want to have something drafted that's specific to having a special magistrate only, or do you want to continue to have both? I think we should give direction to the village attorney so that when it does come back, are you willing to have it as a first read, or do you want to have a discussion? Because part of the problem is you have, as you know, when you don't have a code board, things are going to back up. And I am concerned about that. Either that, or we can possibly, if you want to, have a special meeting. I mean, that's some of the possibilities. And then I'll go ahead. Did you want to let him speak, or do you want motion, or?
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Vice Mayor.
Just for clarification, because I don't know the answer to this question. The people that have been served right now, the way this is going to be, at this moment right now for this ordinance would have been possibly January that the magistrate would have been in. Now we're going to be dragging it on longer. What happens to the people that have code issues right now?
Correct.
Are they going to be fined, and can we waive those fines? I mean, that's one of the concerns that I'm having, which would have been in my statement that I was going to make tonight. That's one of my concerns that I have, is that people have already been cited. We haven't had and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think we had a meeting in July, August, something like that we haven't had a meeting. And now we're going to go all the way into, by the time this goes up, it's not going to be into February.
Is it, I take your point, sir. May I ask if the commission would consider, we're having 2 workshops anyway, can we just have a special commission from 6:30 to 7 before then to get this moving forward when the manager comes back?
Which date are you asking about, Mayor?
I believe we have, Madam Clerk, if you'll clarify, I believe we have a communication workshop on the 17th and a branding workshop on the 24th. We could, if my fellow commissioners would agree, since we're going to be here anyway, could we go ahead and put a meeting before then to discuss that specific ordinance only, so that we can get it moving faster, so that at least people aren't having to wait on this? And I'm sure the attorney will work with the manager to ensure that there is no negative impact on the members that are pending, the matters that are pending. Would that be a fair accounting, sir, Madam Attorney?
There were a few questions in there.
Sorry.
My first question is, does the commission want me in attendance on the 17th, if that's the date?
If we have to go forth with it, that, yes, I guess only for that portion. Well, first of all, before we do that, and she's checking the dates, would the commission agree that that would be a way to proceed so that we can move this faster?
So it'd be the 17th?
And the 24th. So we'd have a first read, we'd have a draft, the way it would work is we'd have a discussion on the 17th, a first read on the 24th, and the second read in November's meeting.
Can't have it, the first reading would be in November.
No.
That's a voting thing. You can't have that at a workshop.
No, I'm suggesting that we have a special commission meeting on the 24th, the 17th, and you may or may not have to be there on the 17th if the manager's there. So it would have to be the 24th for the first read, and then what's the November I'm sorry, the November commission meeting is which date? 5th. So that would be November 5th. So we'd have the first read on the 24th, the second read on the 5th, and we'd be back on the same timeline that we would have been in the first place.
So the 24th would be a special commission meeting.
Correct. And so would the 17th, but the attorney would not be present on the 17th, but would be present on the 24th.
I have a question for the village clerk. How early do we have to get proposed ordinances to the daily business review to be advertised for second read? This is a tight. This proposed timeline is quite.
Yes. Well, I can get on the week of 28th to the 1st, and to be read on the November 5th.
For a first read. Correct. So for the second reading. So we could do it. Okay, so we can fit the timeline. Correct?
Second is November 5th.
I'm sorry?
The second. So
Re-
October 1st, we're proposing October 24th for first read, November 5th for second reading.
Correct.
First reading, and November 5th, the second reading.
Will that work for your schedule?
Yeah, it's not a scheduling. Yes, I will be there, but I want to make sure we have our 10 days in between and that we have time to comply with the advertising requirements. And
Okay.
It looks like we do, so those dates will work. It's tight, but
If it's not, then we can deal with it if we have to change the date. So does the commission agree, now that that's working, that we can do that in order to get back on timeline, just to make sure we can move forward with something so that we're in place?
So the discussion will be in which date?
The 17th would be the discussion. It will just be us. The attorney will not be attending, and the manager. It'll be a half an hour before. So from 6:30 to 7 or 6 to 6:30. I don't know how that's going to work. How about 6:30 to 7 and then 7 for the workshop? Does that work?
That works.
Madam Clerk?
6:30 to 7?
Can we make 6:30 to 7 the special commission and then 7 on for the workshop?
The 5th.
Okay.
Okay.
So August 25th is going to be the special commission meeting, correct?
No. The 24th of October is going to be the branding workshop, and we're going to do it 30 minutes before for the first read. So 6:30.
24th is going to be a special commission meeting.
Correct. So we're going to have a special commission meeting on the 17th, and that's going to be just to review and have a discussion on the actual ordinance. Okay? And then that's going to be a half an hour before the communications workshop. On the 24th, we're going to have a half an hour before to have the branding workshop. We're going to have the first read. And on regular commission meeting will be the second reading on November 5th. Does that work for everybody?
For no on this, we're going to have only a half hour.
If we have to go over, we'll go over.
And that's a voting one, correct?
No, on the 5th is going to be the one we're going to be voting in.
Meeting have to be a voting.
Yes.
Okay.
It just has to be a meeting.
All right. So that's going to be on October 24th.
Hopefully we'll work.
It's going to be a special commission meeting.
Right. Hopefully we'll work out everything on the 17th.
Right.
Yeah. That work, sir?
Yes.
Yes? 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 And sir, yes. Okay, so it works for all of us with consensus. Okay, then the next question is, and that can be wait till the 17th, but the next question is whether or not to go with just a special magistrate or code board or both. I'm saying like an or function, which is where it is now, or a special magistrate. If you all want to wait till the manager is here, we can bring that up on the 17th. Does that sound what everybody wanted to do?
Yes.
Yes.
But
Yes?
also, can we have clarification that the people that have been cited now are not going to be penalized?
I think we have to be careful here, but I would ask the attorney to address that in the best way the attorney is able to do so.
These are the kind of questions I would prefer to get outside of meetings. The manager and I have discussed this. We've discussed it with the code enforcement officer.
Can you be as general as you can be based upon?
We've addressed it with staff.
Okay. And feel free to meet with the attorney afterwards to discuss what that means, sir. Okay. So then now we're moving on to 12B, commission procedures. Draft ordinance. 12B.
Yes. So the commission hosted 2 public workshops regarding commission meetings and procedures with the hopes of adopting and codifying decorum rules, rules of debate, and some other various items. So there's several hours of work here. Our blueprint was actually the county's rules of procedure for their meetings, and that was kind of the blueprint in both workshops. Our second workshop was held on September 18th. As a result of that, this is a working draft for discussion, not for first read, a working draft of what the commission has collectively discussed out of the two workshops. It's for review, it's for discussion, it's not ready for first read. The one thing I would point out is there were a few items that in both workshops, it was clearly a sticking point, and there was no consensus. All the ships were not sailing in the same direction with certain proposed areas of the county's rules of procedure. So those were removed. I know the commission is eager to get formal codified rules of procedure in place, so sometimes perfection can be the death of progress. So the main difference between this draft and the draft that we were working out of in the second workshop is that sticking points, I mean items that we stayed on batting back and forth for like 20 minutes, 15 minutes, there were a few. Those are not here anymore. So this is, in my opinion, more of a reflection of items that seem to be a general consensus in public comments, commissioner comments in the two public workshops.
Thank you. I did have a lot of questions that I have, and I'll wait to be the last person to go. This time we went from this side, so I'm going to go from this side, going this direction.
Oh, okay. I think it looks like most of what was captured at the workshop is captured in here. I think it's important to note, I think sometimes this is mischaracterized as an attack on residents. It's really about the fact that this village has never run itself as a professional organization. I've said that countless times. This is to require that to have, and one of the big things about this is having meeting procedures about how the commission is to conduct the meetings. And I think, one aspect is, yes, there is some requirements regarding decorum, but that should fall on both parties, residents and commissioners. And I think that what we have in here in the last part of this item.
What page, sir?
On page 14 of 16 at the bottom, it starts censor. I think that's important. I think that's something that's never been entertained in the past, and I think it's important because residents do want to see the commission being held accountable, and I think this is probably the strictest way to hold the commission accountable. So I think that's important.
That's a really good point.
I think it's important to point that that's in there. That's something that we never had before. So now, if a commissioner goes off the rails, his fellow commissioners, his or her fellow commissioners now have a way to reprimand that commissioner, which we never had before. So I think that's very important. The one question I had, looking through everything, page 3 of 16, there's a section on there about special meeting and emergency meetings. I just want to make sure that language about the special meetings fall in line with the language that's contained in the charter, specifically section 4.01. It talks about special meetings. So I just want to make sure that this mirrors that language and that this does not deviate in any way or contradict the language that's in the charter regarding special meetings. And I'm trying to pull it up real quick just to...
I think you made a good point, sir, that there is one section there where they talk about 7 members and stuff, so there was some error, and I think I had spoken to the attorney about that briefly, but in that paragraph where it says 7 members, there's not 7, there's 5, and that was one piece.
Yeah, and under that meeting, under the charter in section 4.01, under section A, meetings, the second sentence down, it talks about special meetings may be held on the call of the mayor or upon the call of 4 members of the commission upon no less than 24 hours notice to each member in the public, and it goes on with a little additional information. I just want to make sure that we just want to make sure that the language that's in the ordinance
sync.
completely falls in line with what's in the charter.
I had a question on that. This is just a consideration. How do 4 members call a meeting if you don't break sunshine? And that was another thing in the charter I thought was a little awkward. Or 3 or 4. Yeah, that was one of the. It's kind of an awkward thing.
It is awkward, but there could be instances where 4 commissioners each call the manager because there's some exigent circumstance in the village that needs to be addressed.
Okay.
So it's not that they're all picking up the phone and doing a phone tree, saying, "Hey, do you think we should call a meeting?" "Yeah, I do." "Okay, get so and so. Let's all talk about it." But there might be an instance where the manager's phone is blowing up or the clerk's phone is blowing up because something happened in the village that can't wait, and the commission meeting needs to be called.
Okay. Thank you. I wanted clarification because the language in the charter, in my opinion, wasn't clear on that. So
I was going to say that's what your current charter says. That's what Section 401 says,
Yep.
that the mayor has the authority to call a special
And so
meeting
does the
or
majority of the commission.
the majority of the commission.
Right. Thank you. Commissioner Tudor, anything else?
No, that's it for now.
Thank you. Vice Mayor?
In here, I think there's a lot of good points, and there's a lot of bad points in here. Stuff that I have. I like that we hold the commissioners accountable for holding the residents accountable. As far as this going to an ordinance, we have a couple other items that I think are very important that have not. I think the city attorney told us on I think it was the driveway and the construction ordinance that there was a cost of $5,000 to do that ordinance. And I appreciate that you were looking out for cost, but it's going to cost the same thing here to do this ordinance, right?
No, this work is done. That's what the workshops were.
Okay, no, I know.
Yeah.
Workshop, but you still have to do an ordinance. Because don't this have to go in front of the voters?
No, this goes before it has to go before the commission twice for 2 reads. The cost to the village now is for the clerk to pay DBR to advertise it.
Right, but doesn't this have to go in front of the voters to approve this?
No, that would
No.
be for the charter. This
This
is
is
in
an
the
ordinance.
code.
So tonight we're just basically having a discussion, and then we're going to have a first reading and then a second reading, right?
Right. This is basically me checking in with the commission, saying this is what I've put together after the 2 workshops we've held. Do you think it's ready to go through the 2 readings?
I mean, a lot of homework was done on this. I'll give the attorney credit.
No, I just did it for you.
Give attorney credit for it, and I also give Commissioner Tudor, because this was his original item, and he did a lot of homework on this. I have no problem with moving forward from the discussion to the first reading, but I do have some concerns on subject matter that's in here that I'd like to. We're going to be able to go over that in the first reading, right?
It'd be better if we did it now before first read, sir, because that way we will have a clean first read. That's why we're having the discussion tonight. Because you don't want to change it and advertise it so everybody thinks it's one thing, and then when we go to vote on it, we switch it on the second read. That's why we're having this discussion this evening. Do you want to go page by page if there's something you need?
If we can go down to the other ones and I'll look at this. As we don't take up a lot of time.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and I personally, Commissioner Samaria, if you need more time to review and you need to give feedback in the first read, I don't think that it's the end of the world. It's just the most not the most efficient process.
I'll be honest, and I'm being honest with you. I really want to go. I went over this and I looked at it. A lot of other again, I'm not making any excuses, but this is put together pretty good because we copied it from other cities. So I really want to go over this thorough. So going into the first reading will be.
That's your choice, sir.
Just so you're clear, it's not the most efficient use of our resources. But that being said, at the top of page 4 of 16, where it says Board of Village Commissioners may be canceled, 1 by resolution or motion adopted at a regular meeting by a majority of the commission members present, or 2 by 7 members of the board.
Yeah, I just
the
that's
mayor.
That's an
yeah. Okay, just want to make sure we're
So I'll revise that
catching
to reflect your.
Okay. And then in 2, just below, an emergency meeting of the Village Commission may be canceled one by resolution. Is that really realistic, that we would cancel an emergency meeting by resolution? Just the way, I just think we're taking things from a much bigger municipality than our own. And
Right, and we did trim the fat a lot because a lot of the things that apply to the county commission would not apply to the Village of Biscayne Park, just in terms of the formality of the procedures.
Yeah.
Do we all concur that we can remove that section?
I mean, my recommendation would be to ratify a cancellation.
Yes, ratify. At the next regularly scheduled commission meeting.
Similar to when in the workshops you were discussing, if the manager has to cancel at the next regular meeting, he has to provide a memo in the minutes as to why a prior meeting was canceled.
Perfect.
Similar to that.
Does everybody agree on that? Which can, the reason why and ratification at the next meeting. Yes?
I agree. Yeah.
Okay.
Perfect.
Yeah, that's fine.
No, she's just correcting.
Yeah, she's just correcting it.
Gotcha.
We've all agreed to her offer of a revision. I think that's all. Everything else seemed pretty tight to what we discussed in our last meeting.
I had a couple of points I'd like to make if you're finished.
Yes.
Okay. On page 3 of 16, we had talked about the possibility of allowing commissioners to possibly change that date, so I was just wondering if we can add a sentence in there so that if the commission in the future wants to change it, we're not set on that without having to have a second reading, ordinance. We had discussed that possibility.
I'm sorry, Mayor, which
Sure, I'm sorry. Under regular meetings, we have specific times on Tuesday, first month, 7 p.m., adjourn no later than 11 and all that. We had discussed briefly that perhaps some language that allow the commission, as they got sworn in, to change that time and date. If there was, I think we said a supermajority or majority, I can't recall that, but
in terms of like the master schedule for each
yeah,
year.
yeah. Rather than, because we've always done Tuesday at 7, but what happens if we end up having a whole commission that can't do that and they want to make it on Wednesdays? We had talked about at least getting some language so we didn't have to revise the whole ordinance over that.
And the discussion was about your first the first meeting of your fiscal year, or the first meeting of the calendar year?
I think it was the first meeting of upon swearing in of a new commission is where the way that came up. Because we actually do it usually, and I believe we do it in January, correct? If you could just look at that, and if it's possible, if it is, and if it's not, then...
Here's the thing, if your code says that it's every Tuesday, and you have the wiggle room to move it by just saying so in a public meeting, I think you're covered.
Okay, all right, that's fine.
Because I don't want to bind you to having to set your schedule for the whole year and potentially contradict that it's a Tuesday in the code when you have wiggle room to just vote to move it.
Okay, I defer. That was that was one point I'd noticed. Also on... Let's see, public workshops. I wanted to add the word agenda in there. I want to make sure that one of the things I want to stop having us doing is having a generic name for something without us all understanding ahead of time what that work is. And it just like we have agenda items that we have to have a certain structure for, I think the same is true for a workshop. There should be very specific, so if we're going to vote on a workshop, we know what that workshop is and there's nothing hidden in it. We all know what we're going to be talking about.
Can we vote on workshops?
Yeah, well, for example, if we all want to hold a workshop and we vote on the workshop, I think we should vote to approve a workshop. But we kind of do it blind now. We say we're going to have a workshop on communication. Well, what does that really mean? I don't know, Mr. Tudor, that's your workshop, so you figure it out and tell us then. And then the night before we get an agenda item and we all are talking about this a commission workshop, and we're going, oh, I didn't know that's what that was going to be. Forgive me, Commissioner Tudor, it wasn't specific to your commission workshop, but I was trying to make a point. I think just like anything else, it should be more formalized. It should have backup. We should vote on it with all of it prepared and say, yes, we want that workshop with those things. That's my point.
I agree with that.
And whomever, pardon me, Madam Mayor, whomever the sponsor of that workshop or work session is, should provide the commission with the agenda, the materials, et cetera, so that it brings to fruition the purposes of the original memorandum that was put forth, stating the background and the issue
Yes.
that commissioner would like to address.
Right, and I'd like that put before us so when we vote on a workshop, we're voting on that thing that's in front of us, not something imaginary.
Right, and so that it doesn't run away with us and then we end up in an inefficient work session.
Or somebody thinks it was supposed to be about one thing and it turned out to be about another.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Madam Mayor. Just correct me if I'm wrong. Didn't you say that when we have an agenda item and then it goes into a workshop, it's no longer that commissioner's agenda item, it belongs to the commission. So how are you going to have an agenda item that is not...
Well,
Perfect example is the driveway. When I had the driveway ordinance, I was informed that it's no longer my agenda item, that it belongs to the commission as a whole.
Right, but my point was, it was a little simpler than that. When you put forth an item in a meeting,
right,
you have to have all of these things, including fiscal costs and all that other things. The same thing should be for a workshop, is my only point. You do it the same exact way, except you bring it forth as an item. I'd like to have a workshop on communication. So it's a discussion item. But in that, it may not be fully developed because maybe Commissioner Tudor says, I'm not going to kill myself and do this if the commission doesn't want it. He'll say, are you all interested in it? Yes. He says, okay, can we have a set a date? Okay, it's a month from now, but before that meeting, we have a full packet given to us at a regular commission meeting that says, we're voting on this workshop. Does everybody agree this is the content of it? And we move forward. Just like an agenda item. So that we're not...
I think that, if I may, I think that would be a good idea. It would avoid the misunderstanding and accusations that followed from the branding workshop. If I had been able to bring in that PowerPoint, which was ready weeks in advance of that session, to share with my fellow commissioners so everybody understood the goal was to reach the widest amount of residents and not to just create discussion in the room, I think we might have come out of that with a better understanding of what the goals were and an appreciation of the wider participation that
Commissioner Weiss,
that goal was.
Commissioner Weiss, I tend to agree with you. If we would have had that, I think...
There was just no way for me to share it. I would have been happy to.
The whole main part that I had was that I didn't know anything that was going on until the night of the event. So, again, having the agenda item just as a workshop, just as an agenda item, that way we know exactly what's going on. That's exactly the way it should be.
Okay, so do we have consensus that we're going to make a more formalized version of having a workshop where you have to put it forth, is everybody interested, and then we'll agree to this is the agenda that's going with it in the packet materials, and that way another commissioner, for example, if Commissioner Tudor puts together a whole workshop and we agree this is what's going to be, and we'd say, well, can we include this, that, or the other, and Commissioner Tudor says, yeah, great. So we pass that on to Commissioner Tudor, and by the time the workshop's there, everybody knows what's in it, what's attachments, and how it's going to be developed. And that may take a little longer, in all fairness, because that way we have to have a discussion, do we even want it? And then Commissioner Tudor's, this is some of the stuff we might discuss, and then he could come back and say, this is the final packet, or is there any issues, or whatever.
So just make sure I have an understanding, because the way we have it written currently here, that they'll be scheduled publicly by resolution with a clear and express workshop objective stated therein.
I think the resolution's a little formal. I don't think we need a full resolution written legally. By vote.
Yeah, I think it could just be by vote, but just make sure I understand. So you're saying after that, then we want to have a meeting where the packet for the workshop is presented?
As us all agreeing on it, or at least the content. It may not take two. It may not take two. You may have it already all set up. I want a commission workshop. Here's everything I plan to do. I'm bringing it fully to the commission. Do we all agree on X? We all agree on X. It goes forward. But if, for example, you don't want to develop it because it takes time, you just want to know if anybody's interested in it. So, for example, if you said, if you're interested in a branding workshop, that's great. I'll bring it back for the commission to look at and see if this is what you had in mind. It would depend on the level that it's being presented at.
So it just would push up, because let's say, for example, in practice, let's say I've said, at this commission meeting, let's have a workshop on, planting shrubs. The commission says, great. We kind of give a little bit more detail about what we hope to accomplish. Great, we're going to move forward that. So you're saying at the next commission meeting in November, then we would say, well, here's a packet for the workshop, and the commission would then approve the packet for the workshop that then would be held.
Correct. Only if it's, and the only reason I'm suggesting that is that we all agree, at least in theory, what that is going to contain. Because I have found, for example, on driveway workshops, and you and I, it's like the sore spot of the village. On the driveway workshops, it becomes, here's, as the presiding officer, whether that's me or anybody else in the future, you can't always expect the presiding officer to say, okay, we have a workshop tomorrow, and by the way, we don't really know what's in it, and you need to come up with something, and the manager has to come up with something. I think if we're going to call workshops, the person who's calling it should put it together, put the materials together, and then everybody knows what we're discussing.
And I think that should be I would argue that we should do that at the actual meeting. So for example, if I'm going to present a workshop on planting shrubs, there should be some detail and I think the commissioners can take the time to write up a quick memo about what
When you make
they
the
hope to
initial
accomplish.
motion
When you make
to
the,
do it.
the
Yeah.
initial pitch.
Yeah.
Here it is. Oh, okay.
Here's
yeah,
a
that
rough
was
agenda of what we do.
As long as it's got enough detail for us to make a decision, that's my only objection. That's what I found historically with workshops here. We're a little loosey-goosey.
Well, and I think that's what's, and maybe I'm wrong, but it looks like that's what that language is intended to put more detail when we agree to a workshop, because it talks about express workshop objectives stated there, clear and express workshop objectives. So I just think that we should make it at that time. That's what's presented. Then we vote on having.
That's
the workshop.
fine. But it should be done. That's fine, as long as
Otherwise
it's.
you may be 60 days out.
I know, it's still moving along. I understand that point, but let's just be very cognizant of that. If we're going to bring up a workshop and we want it, that we're very detailed when we do
We
it. That's all.
probably can strengthen the language a little bit.
Yeah.
I get the spirit of what.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you all very much. Do we have a consensus on that?
Yes.
Yes?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Just one second. Let's see here. Oh, okay, on page 7 of 16, we've always had a quorum is not required for public workshops. I don't agree with that, and I'll tell you why. If we're going to have a workshop where everybody's in the intent, because the workshops are usually for the commission, so I just don't agree that it shouldn't be a quorum. I think a quorum should be present. Yeah.
I thought we always have a. We don't-
This says not required. I'd like to remove the word not and make it required.
Yes, I think it should be required.
Do we agree?
Well,
Go ahead.
With the proposed language we're talking about, the commission would be voting on having the workshop in the first place. So, in the spirit of that, if you voted to have the workshop.
I know, but just to be clear, I'd like to remove the word not and say is required. That is, that
According to this, it can be 2 commissioners be at the workshop.
can be one.
Or even 1 commissioner.
Right, and then they're going to come to the commission.
Right. Well, my question is, do you want to link that to the commissioners who voted for the
Affirmatively
workshop
for it have to come?
That's what I mean. Yeah.
Well, hopefully.
I don't have a problem with that. Do you have a problem with that?
Hopefully a commissioner is going to be at a workshop because he wants to be at a workshop. He's going to take his job much serious to be, unless he has a drastic reason why he can't, just like for a commission meeting.
Right.
You know.
Well, the thing is, workshops do come at an additional, it takes up staff time to record it and all of that. So, if 3 commissioners vote for the workshop to be scheduled, right? They follow all of these things that we're talking
hear
about
that?
here, and there's a vote, and 3 commissioners say yes, let's do it. Do you want to make sure that those 3 commissioners show up, or is it any 3 for a quorum? Do you know what I'm saying? Do you want to?
Do you want the ones who affirmatively voted for it to have to show up to the meeting?
Yeah, but suppose they haven't.
I think I just want to have a quorum because if somebody does have an emergency, then we're actually forcing somebody to cancel the workshop. One person with an emergency couldn't come. I think that's.
Madam
I think that's
Mayor,
what
I'm sorry, I was in the restroom, but I do think the person who initially proposed the workshop should be there.
That's already in there.
Okay,
The
I
question
just
was
didn't know
then-
if we'd reached the point
No,
of.
I'm on page 7 of
Okay.
16 where it says a quorum is not
Right.
required.
But
I'm
just because we
suggesting-
voted in favor of it, if there's a reason you can't be there, if there's a quorum present, we can go forward.
Right.
Okay.
Correct. Okay.
And if for some reason that person, could we have a way there's a timetable as long as they advertise 72 hours? If the person that for some reason can't make it, if they give notice.
That part of the challenge, and I know what you're getting at, because in this particular case, there was very little time when that meeting was canceled. However, things do come up, like today. So we're a small village with a small commission. I do think for workshops, I personally don't think you need that stringency. It's a workshop. But I would like, if you're going to cancel the meeting and you can't attend, to let people know 24 hours in advance. I think that would be appropriate.
Yeah, workshops don't have to, the public doesn't have to be advertised, right? Workshops have to be advertised?
I mean,
We notice them.
We should give notice, but there's no action being taken. So there's no like advertisements in like the Daily Business Review or anything like that.
Okay.
As long as we give 24 hours, that, right?
I mean, short of an emergency, right, which could come up, I think that's 24 is reasonable. I would recommend a carve-out for emergencies, though, because if you're requiring a quorum and only 3 commissioners wanted it, and you knew only 3 commissioners were coming, but one of them is sick and you don't have a quorum anymore, it's. I would advise you to have some out to proceed, so people don't show up knowing there's only going to be 2. Yeah, but I think 24, short of something like that, 24 is reasonable as like the standard.
Okay. Everybody agree? Yes?
Yeah.
Okay. Persons addressing the commission, this is just I think a comment that Commissioner Mize had made, and I don't see it in here, is just addressing people formally. I just think it's an appropriate thing to do.
What page are you on?
Page 8 of 16, number 4.
Yes.
Okay. And then, if everybody, and we all agreed on that last time, I just didn't see the language there. Hold on, I think there's one other thing. I just want to make sure it's something. No, that's fine. On page 13 of 16, we've never really done a vote. We do a vote, but we don't necessarily do it by roll call. So I just wanted a clarification on that.
So this is still this
county.
This is very much still the counties.
Could you lighten that a little for us? I think.
I tried to bring it back a little bit because there was even stuff about taking vote by machine, which was obviously something the village does not need to concern itself with. But yes, I don't really have feedback from the commission as to how you all are feeling about this. I just removed the obvious.
Right. Do you all want roll call for resolutions? Or do you want, we've always done it by, all those in favor, aye. Do you want actually roll call per, ordinances, I know that's the appropriate thing to do, but for resolutions? I'll ask my fellow commissioners. Do you want to have a roll call for that?
I think it's unduly formal.
Okay. That's my take on it. Vice Mayor?
I like to have roll call.
For a resolution? Okay. And sir?
I'm all about the clear rules and things being very strict and professionally done, so I would say go ahead and do a roll call.
Okay, so we're at a 2-2, and that one is, we'll have to decide that later. Okay.
I can square that circle.
I don't care. I mean,
Well, this is just for feedback, so I can mess with it. I've received feedback from the commission. I think I can.
Okay. Recess. I think we had a commission member may move for recess during a pending meeting, and is that a simple majority? I just want to clarify number 13 on page 14 of 16.
I'm sorry,
That's okay.
Can you repeat?
I know. I'm sorry you're not feeling well. 14 of 16 and number 13 for recess. I just want to assume that's a simple majority. It wasn't stated. It wasn't stated in there. I just wanted to make a note that maybe we need to make a statement about simple majority there.
So for adjournment?
Yeah, for recess.
Simple.
Simple. Right, absolutely. Right, but it was absent here. That'd be overkill. Right. Yes. Under the censure, same page on number 1, it talks about civility, order, and decorum, but it doesn't talk about the law. I know that's what we do, but maybe there should be some mention of not something statutory. I don't know. But you can look at that.
That's a policy decision for the commission because censure's a interesting thing, and I don't want to confine you because you cannot think of every hypothetical situation that will warrant censure. I could tell you about one that happened in Broward County recently that I won't repeat on the dais out of respect for the proceeding. But there's no way you could think of everything that could possibly happen that could warrant censure, and I don't want to tie your hands behind your back.
Okay. All right.
So it's
I'll
vague
withdraw.
intentionally, and I think this did get discussed a lot in the workshops, and I believe you have a super majority or a unanimous on this.
I think a super majority, yep. That's okay, I'll withdraw
it. That's a good belt and suspenders procedurally without confining what behavior would constitute or warrant a censure. I mean, it keeps it, the commission's
Okay,
basically.
I'll pull it back. I just looked, okay. I understand your reasoning for that. Oh, also on page number 2 of the 15 of 16, it basically doesn't say this, but I'm assuming it's implied that the person that is going to be censured cannot vote, or can they? That's the other $24 question.
You can't.
If it's a supermajority, that didn't make any sense.
I mean, that might require an ethics opinion at the time. I would recommend they go to the Ethics Commission on that, because you're governed by the Miami-Dade County Commission on Ethics and Public Trusts rules, and potentially it would be a conflict, but my general recommendation would be, if you pass this, if any individual commissioners ever are up against this rule or this procedure, they should probably call ethics first.
Okay, I will leave that one alone then. That's all I had. Thank you very much. Anybody else for any further comments on this? And then we'll move on to vacation rentals.
None at this time.
Okay, so that item 12C is mine, so I'll go ahead and talk about that. And just out of curiosity, is everybody aware that we've had some issues historically with large parties at vacation rentals? Is anybody not aware of that situations?
I'm aware of that
situation. Just want to make sure. So let me allow me to introduce the item, if I may, sir. I did a lot of writing and a lot of backup, and there's a lot of information here. I'm going to see if I can summarize it and make it a little bit shorter. There are basically 4 recommendations I'm making. First is the village hold at least one public hearing prior to drafting an ordinance to ensure that all stakeholders are heard, neighbors, business owners, and any affected parties. Just to be clear, we have, by my count, if you go on Airbnb and VOB, maybe 20 or so Airbnbs. This is not intended to address any person, any specific unit, anything that's going on in particular. Rather, to take a look at that short-term rentals have a history, unfortunately right now, of because of the legislative way it was handled, is in very purely residential neighborhoods. This can become an issue in terms of noise, ordinances, parking, and things like that. So I do think we need to start looking at what can and cannot be done. I think if staff reviews ordinances from other Florida municipalities and see how these residential communities have had success in dealing with the issues, we might be able to get some traction out of that. I did speak to Mr. Cook for quite some time, who actually is representing us from the Florida League of Cities on this issue in the state, and gave some really good ideas on how to deal with that. People have had success. There's also been some attorneys, some findings, recent findings, that basically discuss that while we cannot say that you can't have short-term rentals, we can legislate and regulate certain components so that doesn't have a negative impact. Whether you make it for everybody or whether you make it specifically for short-term rentals, that's really up for the attorney that has a better handle on what can and cannot be done. I'm asking that there be a narrow focus, that we don't try and make it some big thing, that we actually focus on the problems that we're having here or similar cities are having. And finally, after holding the hearing, I recommend that we direct the village attorney to propose a draft ordinance so that we can help the police department, who is asking for tools, the code officer is asking for tools. So, for example, we had one party, and I know Commissioner Tudor, you were there because I saw you there. Not at the party, excuse me.
Yeah.
Let me be really clear about that. Not at the party.
Yeah, I was not a participant at the party.
Thank you. Thank you.
There as commissioner.
Correct, and I was the same. And it was 300 people. It was a rave party, and when they got finished, properties were destroyed. There was stuff everywhere, and the only thing the code officer could do for the litter is a $25 fine, because that's what we restricted her to. So I think we need to look at how we can better deal with this in a more effective way, and that's the proposal. I open the floor.
Yeah.
I know I did this way, so how about we do it inside out? 1, 2, and then
Good.
3, just to be fair. Go ahead.
I like a lot of this. I looked at this, but for the big parties, isn't there already an ordinance about noise? And isn't there already an ordinance about littering and mediums? And, I mean, I'll give you a perfect example. I got this email from a resident, and I'll just put it for the record, so I'll give it to the clerk, she lives on Griffey Boulevard, and
she's complaining about the party. You know, there's parties
Right.
during the day and stuff like that. So
Right.
my only concern is, don't we already have an ordinance about noise and stuff?
This isn't, but I'll answer may I answer the question? My understanding, because I had the same discussion with the chief, what is noise and what is excessive noise? And some people believe if it's not till after 10. We had one party, the rave party, that started off in early in the afternoon, I believe, and went all night. And it wasn't until the nighttime that people felt that they could call because they thought it's a party and people have parties. So, and I wish the chief was here because he's not, but from what I gather from my conversation with the chief and the code officer, they really don't have the tools, and they were asking for tools. So this is actually in part request from conversations I had with the chief, as well as the code officer, on how we can better deal with this, so to give them the tools. So I would argue that the tools we have now are insufficient according to the individuals who are enforcing those tools.
Okay. No, I agree with it. I mean, I like this really good, very much. But is this also for residents that have it? Because are we going to be saying that we're only going to be, not punishing, but we're going to be punishing people that are having parties and...
Interesting question. And it's a complicated question what you asked. After looking into this, there are varying degrees of what a short-term rental is defined as legally. So in some instances, you can be living in a house and renting out a section, and that becomes the party, in which case it's not a short-term rental. It's not a simple question. So in order to craft that legal language, I would leave that up to the experts, because some of this may have to be broad-based, some of it may be narrow-based. And I wouldn't even begin up after what I read and heard and talked to folks. There are other cities that have already had these issues. They've already gone through those hoops, and we may very well be able to take that language and deal with it, so we don't have to.
And just in terms of timeline, just remember you have the Super Bowl here in Miami next year. This year?
Yep.
This year.
Then I would work off that timeline. No, Dolphins will never have to worry about it. But if everyone's ramping up in preparation for that, because that's when the short-term rentals in South Florida are going to get really bananas. And so just in terms of charting it out, that's something I would keep in mind. And with respect to your legal limitations, you are preempted by state statute from prohibiting them outright. You cannot do that. So when you're exploring what type, if you would like to regulate it, what that would look like, keep in mind you cannot prohibit short-term rentals outright. You're preempted by state law. You're not allowed to do that. That being said, you can regulate it. It could be as simple as keeping your license, because you are required to have a state license if you want to do.
Could you talk more into the mic so that residents can hear you?
You are required to have a short-term license with the state of Florida if you want to do that, even if it's a residential single-family home. Right now, the Village's code doesn't require that person to keep a copy of that anywhere. So the Village has no internal list of where the licensed short-term rentals are in the Village. And come Super Bowl time, you may want that list. And I don't know that it's really so much of an issue here in Biscayne Park, but in Miami Beach, they really cracked down on this. And I mean really cracked down on this because of sex trafficking. And to the point that if you violate their regulations, your first penalty is $20,000. Yep. A $20,000 fine for you the first time they catch you with a short-term rental in Miami Beach. Without...
May I jump in? Having... In the rave party that I won't mention addresses or anything, but in the rave party...
Please don't reference addresses because the homeowners haven't been given notice of...
Okay, in the instance where we had a large party, and there were 2 or 3 of them, I'll just leave it without addresses. The amount of money that was being made was quite significant, so that's why the Miami Beach, I suspect, is putting such a high fine on it, because the amount of money that individuals can make with these parties is quite high. So I just want to explain to everybody that is why perhaps Miami Beach made such a high fee to deter it, because if they hadn't, they couldn't deter it.
And for a banking client that I have, we deal with a lot of high-end foreclosed properties in South Florida, and I mean high-end, like multi-million-dollar homes, and they're vacant for a while. We had an issue with a party promoter where they would advertise online just saying it was a waterfront mansion party, but they wouldn't disclose the location. You had to meet at a stop, and they'd have a party bus ready for you, and they'd pick you up at that stop, and you would go to this undisclosed location to party. When the party was over, they'd bus you back to where they picked you up from. So I don't know if there's properties like that in Biscayne Park, but the party promoters do target, you know, these vacant houses or these short-term rentals to do that to make a huge profit. And
I just so not to belabor this, but my recommendation is that we move forward quickly and allow this to develop based upon and with respect to the attorney time and the billing and the money, if we can find other ordinances that we can possibly.
Miami Shores has one. I mean, if you want something that's more a municipality that's analogous in size that's already kind of addressed it.
And I'll give you the 3 that Mr. Cook also suggested that were very successful.
Okay.
And I'll give you those as well. And perhaps you can look at those and then see what would work.
So does the commission want that ready for discussion in November or for a first read in November with backup? I just want a clear directive as to how.
I think it should be for discussion.
Okay.
Madam Mayor, I think it would be smart for people to have something to react to in order to have that hearing that you're suggesting. People want to come forward and voice their opinions one way or the other, to have something at least for them to react to, so we can show perhaps what Miami Shores is doing and what our version of that might be. That would make people wouldn't come in and object to something that we were never planning to do in the first place, right?
Right. So you're suggesting we have a draft first?
Yeah.
And then bring that draft for discussion at a workshop, in a public hearing, and then put it for first read?
Yeah. If my
Okay.
fellow commissioners are in agreement, I don't think that this is a question of whether or not we need this. It's how quickly we can address it.
Yeah, I agree 100% with that. A question, do we charge these people that rent out, do we charge them the landlord fees where we have a yearly inspections and stuff?
Okay, no. The difference between a short-term rental and a long-term rental is very different in the rules. I hate to do this to you, and there's a lot of information here, but if you read through here, there's actually some definitions, and it's I would say it's not clear, because there are exceptions and whatever, but it's as close as you're going to get. But the definition of a short-term rental is very specific. If you go over the 6 months, you're not a short-term rental. So, for example, and I'm just giving you one example, and I'm not an expert on this by far, but if I rented out my parts from January to June from one person, and then I am not a short-term rental, even though I'd be doing it functioning for the rest of the 6 months as a short-term rental. So it's not as simple as it looks. It is a bit complicated, and people who are doing this are very aware of the law and how to make sure they are within those guidelines to not qualify as a short-term rental. So it's not so simple. But I think if the regulations are strong enough, it won't matter if it's for a short-term rental, somebody who's living on a cottage, so they don't call as a short-term rental, and if it's made broad enough so that we protect the village against those narrow things that I'm going to say this again, the narrow focus of the ordinance should be the problems that we would arise of this. And that's why it was very specific on number 3 in the recommendations. So is there a motion to, I can make the motion if you want, since it's mine.
Well, real quick.
Okay,
just to
I'm
make
sorry.
a
I
comment.
didn't even get everybody.
No.
I'm sorry.
I know when this latest incident came up, I was sending emails to, I think, the chief, the manager, and the attorney.
Mike, please.
Were thinking to themselves, Commissioner Tudor, we got this. Please don't send
No.
us any more links.
No.
But I think one of the municipalities that we should be looking at is City of Miami. They have some very good language that I think we can tailor to ourselves. And I believe that the City of Miami, I believe their case against, one of the Airbnb went to I think they went on appeal.
Yes. Okay. So here's the thing with the City of Miami case. So you're preempted by state law from expressly prohibiting it, unless you had an ordinance in place already before 2011, which you don't have. So City of Miami's case was slightly complex because they were trying to kind of piggyback on a pre-existing that magic date, the pre-2011 grandfathering in. So the Airbnb case with City of Miami explored all of that grandfathering in, but unfortunately for the village, that's inapplicable because in my review of your code, you don't have anything now, and you didn't have anything back then.
And I might suggest that, and I'm going to be very careful how we say this, I would be careful other than to call it a short-term rental. It's very important that we use those words, and I'm going to explain why in a moment. I think we are small enough and smart enough to make the language broad enough to make sure we don't change the character of the village as a residential neighborhood. And I think that is I'm being very specific in my language for a reason, and I think the attorney understands why. There are groups that will be very, very adamant about anybody attempting to do anything to stop their commercial enterprise, and they're very well funded. And I don't want us getting in any legal battles that will cost us money unnecessarily. So my thoughts are, if we have ordinances that are weak now for everybody, they can be made stronger for everybody. That may stop the problem without having to be targeting specifically short-term rentals. But I did have to bring this up as a reason as to why we would even move forward with an ordinance. Am I sort of clear, sir?
Yeah, no, I understand. But I just want to, this should be an easy remedy, because there's stuff that's already out there. I mean, we're not inventing the wheel. So Miami-Dade County has some regulations regarding short-term rentals as well. So I think we have enough information that we should be able to craft an ordinance to address that. My personal opinion, if you don't reside on the property and it's solely for
short-term rentals,
short-term rental purposes, repeated short-term rental purposes, I believe Miami-Dade County has a requirement where, and I don't know if this is a grandfathered in, but I think Miami-Dade County has a requirement that you have to reside there, the host has to reside on the property for a period of time during that year. For the property to be used for that purpose in a solely residentially zoned district.
I would be very pleased if any commissioner here who has found stuff that is useful, we forward it to the attorney.
Yeah, send it my way.
Yeah.
And send it that way, because anything that we can use that other people have done would save us on crafting time.
Yeah.
And with that, because I don't want to keep the meeting going on too long this evening, is there a motion to move forward with the recommendations 1 through 4 with the amended version where the ordinance is crafted first and then the public hearing is secondary?
I'll make a motion.
I'll second the motion.
All those in favor? Aye. Motion passes 4-0.
So that
Okay.
discussion will be in the November regular meeting.
Yes.
And then how long, just a question, after the November election, how long would it take to get this into effect? Because I agree with you, the Super Bowl is coming up in
I just looked up the date. You're 2/2/20. That's the date of the Super Bowl in Miami.
What is it,
so
2/2/20?
2/2/20. So you're still good. We could just keep it with the regular meetings. I don't think we have to do any
Yeah, because I don't want to rush it through, I want to do
Yeah,
it
I
right.
don't- yeah.
Because this is very important.
Okay, next item is Vice Mayor Samaria.
Dade County thought this ordinance was so important that they had 5 sponsors of this bill. After the first reading, they had a 13-0 vote to approve. Then in the second reading, it passed 12-0. The purpose of this ordinance is to protect county employees who know of fraud, waste, abuse, misconduct, or illegal activity in the county government and have the courage to report it. The intent is to promote minority standards to prevent municipalities from taking action against an employee or person reporting a violation by law. Included are protection for reports of unlawful activity, misfeasance, the abuse of power, lawful authority in order to achieve a desired result, malfeasance conducted by a public official that cannot be legally justified or that conflicts with the law, gross waste of funds, self-explanatory, or any other abuse or gross negligence of duty. It is important to provide a safe, ethical, and non-threatening workplace. Further, to be competitive in the marketplace, we can provide protections that other cities so far don't, except for the city of Miami. We can be a role model to create a place where employees are protected from actions being taken when they do the right thing. We can and need to do a better job of making employees feel secure to report issues that they encounter. We want to promote an environment where employees can come forward without worrying about being punished. I personally view this as a win-win for our community and one of the easiest votes this commission can make, regardless of partisan politics.
We talk a lot about transparency. Now it is time to put our money where our mouth is. I encourage each commissioner to vote with me to adopt this in ordinance as an additional measure of ensuring good, transparent government practices and offer needed additional protection for our employees. Going forward with this ordinance could be a positive social benefit for our employees and improve the village's position regarding truth in government. And I'd like to open it up to the commission now for discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just to do this a little bit differently, I'm going to start, I guess I'll just start on this side and go this way, and I'll be the second, and we'll end up with you closing, sir.
Commissioner Samaria, while I agree in principle, the support that you've shared with us indicates that the fiscal impact of this ordinance could be over $86,000 in the first year, and I'm wondering how we would shoulder that burden. And then, I frankly, with all of the whistleblower conversation in the air, I just nationwide, I have to wonder if anyone who felt so persecuted within their work environment would not find refuge under state or federal whistleblower statutes to that they could avail themselves to without us having to take on an expense which we clearly cannot afford.
I'll just go down and then we'll have you close if that's okay, sir. Okay. In spirit, I have no objection to the item. The problem I have is the same one. I think I agree with Commissioner Wise that the fiscal impact for the county is $86,000 plus funds for the OIG. And the county has 30 to 40,000 employees versus our maybe 20 or so. I direct you to the portion on technical assistance 1C, where it says the technical support reference in the subsections 1A and 1B above is not intended to replace municipalities' own commitment of resources to develop a system of intake, processing, and documentation of disclosures of violations and adverse personal actions and the investigation of such complaints. I believe whistleblowers are already protected under the state and federal law, and I concur with my Commissioner Wise, that the ordinance is unfortunately redundant, but more importantly is a tremendous cost payers to taxpayers. We would be then, and here's kind of the rub, okay? I agree with you. I actually believe that the ordinances in federal and state level don't actually end up with the outcome you want. If I looked up to see how many whistleblower complaints were successful, and there were maybe 3 out of 206. At a cost of tremendous amount of money what would be shouldering is more lawsuits and more legal costs, and that is my big concern. There's some people, our residents objected to hiring a magistrate for maybe $5,000 to $10,000 a year, whatever the cost will be, but we're talking about something that's 10 times that, and that's not even including investigation. That's just setting up the processes in play. And there's something else I don't know if you're aware of, and I'm hoping you are. But Miami-Dade League of Cities actually lobbied very strong with the sponsoring of the bill. Commissioner Hayman, they opposed this bill in its earlier format in July in 2019 and met with her because it was substantially changed, as you'll see on the cover memo. The reason is because small municipalities could have an unfunded mandate. Essentially, we'd create an enormous mini ethics board here. And I'm not opposed to that in theory. I'm opposed to that in taxpayers' dollars. We just don't have the budget for it, and nor are we budgeted this year for it. I just have a couple of questions, if I may, for you, if you don't mind answering at the end, and that is, did you bring this item forward and talk about it with the potential legal costs and other strict regulations and regulatory requirements that the county would impose because you have to follow I don't know if the community knows that, but if you read it carefully, you have to follow it exactly. It's very stringent. And if you fall outside of that, then you can't use the ordinance. And also, I'm going to ask you, did you meet with the finance director or the staffing requirements for budget and other resources needed with the manager, and whether he would support moving forward on this ordinance?
I brought this up as a discussion, and then I can do the other work after that. I mean, if Dade County is willing to do this, and they have 5 sponsors, forget about the cost. They have 5 sponsors of this, and 5 of them want
thought this was important enough to bring it to protect their employees. And then it passed twice. It would have been it was unanimous because at the second reading, there was 12 because one was absent. But unanimously, they agreed to this. And they must have thought this was important enough to bring it. Our cost is not going to be with the same cost as Dade County.
It's going to be more.
No, it's not. We don't have that many employees more to be cost. Can you address this if you don't mind?
Mr. Winklejohn, could you come on up and as best you can? I know you weren't prepared for this, so our apologies for putting you on the spot, but
I don't have a copy of the county's. Am I on? I can't tell.
Yes.
I don't have a copy of this, so I don't have any of the background. But you have some clear logistical differences, and those would have to be analyzed very carefully. I haven't talked to the manager about it in any depth, just seeing this. But there's so many differences that you can't compare what Dade County would apply to any of the other municipalities to yourselves. I mean, you just don't have the organizational structure to compare somebody's complaint would always go to whom? There's only you just don't have the infrastructure, the numbers of people. It would just be very problematic. So you'd have to come up with some sort of external investigative arm.
so we'd have to have an external force that we'd have to hire then.
Yeah,
essentially.
Because the internal reality is, half your employees are in the room at the same time all the time. So you would there's just a simple mathematical flaw that you'd have to figure out a way to overcome to make it a true whistleblower philosophy. I'm from the federal government most of my career, and you've got, even in South Florida, as small as the federal government is, you had tens of thousands of federal employees that you could pull in to be panels, witnesses, things like that. In a village like this, you have almost zero. So, by comparison. So the logistics would be you'd have to make it. You'd have to create it.
So we'd have to have contract outside inspector generals, independent investigator, and legal counsel, correct?
Among the reviewing committees, the sort of the peer type, there's always a peer element to it. Your personnel system is immature by county standards, or it's undeveloped because it doesn't need to be. Like all of those personnel issues just don't relate. So how would you solve that? You'd have to solve it. It would take quite a bit of legwork, I'm sure, but having just heard about this, happy to look into it. See what it might cost.
Mr. Tudor.
Yeah. I completely support the concept of having a whistleblower ordinance. I think it's the right thing to do for employees. There should be something in place. However, I think the only thing we're missing from, and this is just a discussion item, so if we could come back with this with where the manager, along with the finance director, where staff can come back and say, this is what it requires for us to implement it. This is what, the financial impact would be. Because, I don't want to look at what the financial impact is to the county, because that's the county. But I'd like to see the numbers and see if there's a way that we could enact a whistleblower ordinance. But the key part is finding out what would be the financial impact. And I think that's the only piece that's missing. But I think from what Vice Mayor Samaria was indicating, this was more discussion to see if the commission would be interested in taking that next step. And maybe I'm mischaracterizing, but I definitely would like to see the next step, because this is the first time our finance director really
in your budget you did approve one of the line items included a concept of a rewrite of your personnel handbook, if you will. So I haven't spoken to Christian about it, but it sounds like that would be a fold off of that topic.
Yeah, I personally think it would be probably because I don't want to see this just killed here tonight. I think that this should come back when we have some, at the next commission meeting, possibly, where we could get a better idea about how it could be implemented and what would be the cost. Because we may find that the cost is just too great for a municipality our size, or we may find that the cost is manageable because, we may be able to, get resources from the county that, that may assist.
But
So,
I just want to state publicly that the Miami-Dade League of City opposed this for that exact reason and home rule. So it was the cost to the local municipalities, and that the legal cost would be incredible alone. So we're talking about legal costs. I'm not opposed to it in theory. I actually think it's very laudable, and I appreciate that Vice Mayor, Samaria brought it forth. My issue isn't, I think it's excellent that you have any avenue to create transparency up. My issue is cost and budget. I just don't see this, and I think because Miami-Dade League of Cities was so concerned, is why they made it an option. And the other thing I would suggest that everybody looks at is, it's not that we can craft our own Whistleblowers Act. If we craft one, it has to fall in line with the county and has to fall under that minimum standard. And that minimum standard is very costly. It's their reporting requirements. Attorney Rodriguez, you read it. Could you help me out here on terms of what you read? And
so there would be an annual reporting. There would be an annual reporting requirement to the county. Identities would have to remain confidential, but the village would be charged with their own investigations and an annual report of the outcome of those investigations to the county every year. I spoke with the village manager about it. I think this would probably be a more fruitful discussion when he returns. He had some feelings about it in terms of resources. With respect to quotes as to legal, that's extremely speculative, because you could have a fiscal year where you don't have a single whistleblower complaint, and you could have one year where there's some serious issue and it's a repeat issue and multiple whistleblowers. Hypothetically, this isn't an anti-village thing. This is just, in theory, the idea of whistleblowers, that there's multiple, and it takes a lot of resources and maybe even the need to hire additional support staff. So there's no crystal ball to really provide estimated numbers from the legal side as to what the village would be looking at on an annual basis, because it could be zero, it could be tens of thousands. So, I mean, and the manager and I discussed that, so that's tough for me. Then I just remind the commission that there is a state, I think Commissioner Weiss said this, but there's a state and federal whistleblower statute in place now that we're all bound to. It's not like there's no whistleblower law applicable to Biscayne Park.
And the other issue I had is, and then I'll turn it over to Vice Mayor to close. The other issue I had is, we're kind of paying for the law over and over again. So we're paying for a federal law, a state law, a county has a law, and now we want to act our own law. So everybody has, it's like multiple layers, and taxpayers are having to pay for the same things over and over again. That's kind of a redundant piece that I also found not very efficient either.
If the commission does explore it, I would recommend that it does be an outside third party, because your village is so small, and how many full-time employees do you have in that building there? Right. If something does happen, and I hope it doesn't, but everyone else in the room is going to be a witness. They'd be conflicted out of investigating the whistleblower.
You don't have an investigative body.
Right.
The other thing is a vast majority of your employees are protected under collective bargaining agreements, which would not be silent in this respect. They would have retaliation clauses. Not having them right in front of me, I'm guessing that you may find you are covered almost already 90% through their policies, in essence, and so
through the police and public works,
just
would be covered.
Just the nature of collective bargaining agreements these days.
So it'd be the recreation, which is 2 part-time, 1 full-time, I think. Yeah. And then, correct me if I'm wrong, Madam Clerk, how many are there total in your office? 6 with the manager. And so that would be 7 people. So we're going to write an ordinance for 7 people.
With the recreation manager?
Yeah,
okay.
7.
With respect to the police,
public works manager too, because he's not under the contract, so that would be 8.
With respect to the police department, the chief and I are gearing up for PBA negotiations, because the collective bargaining agreement with the PBA is coming up for a renegotiation. So if this is something the commission wants me to discuss with the chief to get, to negotiate some of this language in the new PBA, CBA, we could explore that when we dive into negotiations. That contract's about to go back to the negotiating table.
So, I'm sorry.
Do you want to close, or do you want allow her? Do you want allow her to go and then you close?
I'm going to close.
Okay, but she wants to make one more comment.
Oh, she wants to.
Yeah, I was just going to say, if I may, so it seems like, as the old expression goes, there's more ways than one to skin this cat. And we are all, in theory, in favor of what a whistleblower statute represents. But there are state and federal safe harbors that employees could avail themselves of. There are collective bargaining agreement terms that would provide provisions, which could be fortified, as you said, in these ongoing negotiations. Would an alternate approach to this be to craft a resolution stating our support of the principles of the whistleblower statute, highlighting those avenues which employees might avail themselves of should they need that kind of relief, and committing ourselves to an ethical and clear path to avail, and for an employee to avail themselves of those processes should the need arise, so that we make the representation, as Commissioner Samaria has suggested, that we hold these rights in the highest order, but do not take on something that is administratively, operationally, and financially outsized for our municipality.
Would you support that, sir?
I'm asking also our attorney if that might be a way to express what Commissioner Samaria is attempting to do here without us treading into waters that will financially, operationally, et cetera, take us over our heads.
Well, I don't know who up here spoke to the manager about this when it was enacted, but I did. I followed it because the league did oppose it. That's true. The original version, the league opposed it adamantly because it would have been mandatory, the initial version. And for small, like Village Biscayne Park, El Portal, smaller municipalities, it would have been an unfunded mandate. So they got together with the commission, and this is the version that passed, an opt-in. So the manager and I have discussed this since the genesis, as it evolved, because we were monitoring it. Because again, per your charter, staff is the manager's half of your charter and your commission, manager, government structure. So I don't know who up here has actually spoken to the manager about what this would look like implementing it, but I have, and I think it would probably be prudent for the commission not to vote on anything about this without actually consulting with the charter officer who's in charge of staff.
Did you speak to the manager?
Yes, I did.
Vice Mayor?
Yes, I did.
And did he support it?
I'd rather not say.
You'd rather not say?
She's
Okay.
not here. I don't.
That's fine. I was trying to get a spirit, that's all.
Here's the problem that I have, and I'm looking at you because we had an email discussion, so I'm being very careful what we discuss to say. But there's a point that I'm trying to make. Is you know what I'm trying to get at? Is the cost of not having a whistleblower come forward can cost the village money and problems. I think you know what I'm trying to get at.
Let me stop because I know exactly what you're trying to say without saying it. Yes, and let me say, the hypothetical you're concerned about that we have, batted around, and it is a hypothetical, there's a state and federal law in place already that would have,
Why did people do it?
Well, that's because we could talk offline about it. But I just want to remind the commission that there's state and federal ones already in place. I think the spirit of this is fantastic. And, it's a policy decision for the commission, but I would really recommend that you speak to to the manager about what this would look like in implementation on a day-to-day in managing the village with this limited staff you have. And circle back with the finance manager about, the finance director about where the money would come from.
I'm happy to do that. I'm also happy to support Commissioner Wise's version, which would allow us to be clear where we stand on this, because I think everybody here on the dais is in support of.
Although, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, Madam Mayor, but if Commissioner Samaria would like to pursue this and get the numbers and put it in front of everyone, I think he should be allowed to do that, but I think I have a very clear line of sight as to where this is going from an operational and financial perspective, and so I only offered that alternative because I did think that the initial proposal was about honoring the spirit of a whistleblower statute. We do not need our own individual whistleblower statute. These laws already exist, and we cannot afford it. But I am more than I don't think he should be stopped from pursuing it or putting it in front of the commission for further consideration.
Dade County has done it, the city of Miami has done it, and there is about 2 other cities that are in the process of doing it.
Do you know how many employees they have?
I can't believe that we're talking about putting money over the protection of our employees if they see wrongdoing. We had employees in the past that have seen wrongdoing and did not come forward, and it cost.
I gotta
could you
stop-
please? Could you please?
I gotta stop you right there, Commissioner, Vice Mayor. Sorry, respectfully, if we're looking prospectively in terms of policy, go forth and debate, but let's please be measured in our statements from this dais.
I'm going to, because I did talk adamantly on on this issue. I'm aware of the financial impact and the costs. Well, I don't have hard numbers to give. This is just not in our ballpark. It's not. And if Commissioner Samaria chooses to put staff time in to do that, to figure out what the numbers are, I guess we can do that and wait till the next meeting. However, I'm asking Vice Mayor to consider an alternative that is more in keeping with the 8 employees that we're talking about. Or hypothetically, assuming it's not only 8 employees and you want to cover people under contracts, I just think it's going to cost them $86,000 plus OIG expenses, plus we're going to have to outsource. It just doesn't make any sense to me fiscally. I'm sorry. You want to go ahead and split the baby? Go ahead.
Yeah. For me personally, it's an important enough issue, and I think employees need to be aware of their protections. For me, in order to make a decision, because what I'm hearing from both sides, I'm hearing one side that seems to indicate that cost is not going to be an issue or shouldn't be considered. The other side of the argument is that the cost is too much for us, but as a neutral party sitting here, neither party has given me those costs, or at least, something I feel comfortable enough with. I would be much happier if this could be brought back with the manager here, and also with some numbers and an idea about if we wanted to do this, what would it cost? Give us a better idea what it would cost and how would we implement it. Because I want to hear from the person who runs the administration to be able to come back. Because in his discussions with other staff members, he may, he could change the opinion once they start talking numbers. If his opinion is that he doesn't support this, it could change. But for me, I can't vote no on something when one of the primary determining factors is cost, and the cost hasn't been, from either side, I haven't been swayed by either side regarding the cost.
I appreciate that. I'll just say it's in the backup, and I think having discussed this with other mayors of our size, there was an extreme concern over cost and the need for it. So I'll leave it at that. I think we're if there's a motion anybody wants to make a motion. If not,
I move that we have the manager direct our finance manager to determine what the costs would be to go forward with this, so that Vice Mayor Samaria can further explore the possibility, so that Commissioner Tudor has a more accurate view of what these costs would actually be.
So
that was a vote in your favor, Vice Mayor Samaria.
Is there a second on that vote? There's a motion on the floor. Is there a second for the motion?
I'll second that.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion passes? Was that aye, sir? I didn't hear you. Okay. Motion passes to come back with a cost for the November meeting, so we can further consider this, or an estimated of cost. Would that be more accurate, estimated of costs? Okay, and staffing and so forth, right? Yep. And let me ask my commissioners that this cost is associated with also staffing, right?
Yes.
Any cost that we would incur as a result of implementing this.
All right, motion passed
legislation.
4-0. Anything else on request for placement agenda items? None?
I just have some very brief attorney updates.
Go ahead, attorney updates, and see if you
So-
survive the night.
So I've circulated the Attorney General response. I'm not going to belabor that. You all have a copy of it. If you have any questions, let me know. But I have my marching orders with what to do with it. So that was one update. The other is with respect to the FEMA appeals, and I would like some direction from the commission on this. So at the last meeting, I advised you that the president has increased the federal cost share to 90%. It was originally 75%. I told you we were looking into whether the previously paid claims would be supplemented with a second check to bridge that 15%. DEM confirmed that the village is getting supplemental checks on the claims that were already paid at 75. The village's the difference is being cut, but it didn't. It's my understanding that didn't hit the last fiscal year. This is the first day, so it'll be in your fiscal year, which starts today, I think. Yesterday. So that's one update about the claims that we thought were done and settled and paid. Supplemental checks are coming, which is great. So with respect to the two remaining appeals, the federal law says that FEMA is supposed to get back to an appellant within 90 days of filing the appeal with either a decision or a request for supplemental information. We've received neither. I've spoken with the manager about it. We've spoken to DEM about it. And essentially DEM came back to us saying, yes, FEMA is very strict about the deadlines in the law to deny appeals. Like if you're not timely, they jump on that and you're denied right out of the gate because it's the easy way out for them, but they don't really honor the deadlines in the law as to their deadline to get back to you. So there's a few options. We could wait. We could reach out to Senator Scott, which my firm has relationship with, and I know some people on this dais have relationships with his staff as well. He's a former client. Or we wait. We really have two avenues as I see it, but I didn't want to unilaterally do something. I don't know that either is more effective.
I was about to say,
I just don't want to approach FEMA through certain channels on behalf of the village without the commission saying go forth.
Let me ask you a question. If you reached out to former governor's office and asked where they are with everybody, rather than specifically asking, because I don't think an inquiry would be an issue. I just don't want to. When we had such a positive response from the state, I don't want to rattle a cage.
Right, and the issue in all of the appeals was the same on repeat. It was just for different time periods. So since we've already won on one, and we have this favorable decision on these two contracts, the hope is they'll follow suit on the others. Otherwise, they're contradicting their prior opinion.
Do you know what where, like, there were 200 cities that were denied, and then there were appeals. Do you know whether or not, because the reason, how do I say this? There was a letter that we got, I believe, or some information. I'm trying to remember where it came from. I don't even remember right now, but it was the idea that FEMA was going to finally release money to pay for things that were obligated. So, for example, a sister city had everything obligated, but they hadn't received a dime. So the question was, when were they going to get their money? So my understanding was in September, which is now passed, they were supposed to release money. I don't know if they did or did not. But I guess what I was trying to get a feel for was where the federal government is in this process, and maybe get an update from that rather than pressuring specifically for us.
Right.
Is that a possible inquiry that would be effective?
That might be a more middle of the road approach. If we want to check in and be the slightly squeaky wheel as opposed to the fully squeaky wheel. I do know that there are municipalities in Miami-Dade County that were obligated, that aren't in the appellate process, that still don't have the money.
Right.
So, and I don't know that that's a trend. I can't speak to that, but I do know there are municipalities in Miami-Dade that are in that boat because I've spoken with them as recently as last week about it. So,
Do you have a recommendation? Wait another month, or?
I mean, I can revisit the issue in November if we're still in the same boat. I'm just checking in. This is the attorney update. The 90 days came and went. They didn't ask for more documents. They didn't give us a decision one way or the other on the other two, but the other two are for a substantial amount of money, especially since we're now at 90% cost share, which is great. I don't know how the commission wants to approach it, but I think it should be...
I'm going to defer to the federal worker over here. No pressure there. It's only $1 million. Don't feel any pressure whatsoever.
And I know plenty about deadlines. We place them on firms, and we have deadlines for ourselves, and we hold ourselves to the deadlines that we tell the firms that we deal with. So, probably the best course of action. How far past the 90 days are we?
I think we're in like the one teens, like right before 120 in that range.
I think we need to have two plans of action ready to go. One is the very friendly, hand on the back type situation, trying to get some updates on where we may be, and maybe going the route of from a big picture standpoint. But we've got to be figure out when we want to pull the trigger and let the dog off the chain.
Exactly, and I don't want
to get all southern on you, but
yeah.
That was pretty good.
Yeah. We can do that.
Yeah, I mean,
but once we do that, there's no one ringing the bell, and it may be to the village's detriment. So I would never do that without checking.
Well, and that's why I think we need to go, the soft approach first. We definitely need to make some inquiries about it, because I was thinking, 90 days. Okay, maybe we're at 95. And for me, I was going to say we should have a date and time to where the gloves come off a little bit. And for me, it was at 120 days, so it's kind of, maybe we'll push that out a little bit. This is one of those things where we've got to we need to be prepared, and we need to already make plans for both ways we're going to deal with FEMA. Historically, they've not been easy to deal with.
Are you afraid they might retaliate?
Well, actually, I don't think they would retaliate.
They're up to their ears in claims they
they
don't have the time to retaliate.
I think I think the other aspect, and I'm going to be the mayor here, I think this has been an unusually active year for them, and with all this stuff going on, and they are buried, and like any other
friendly reminder.
So I think maybe maybe you could just reach out and see where we are and do the friendly, and then come back with us in November,
Okay.
and then we'll come with a decision what else other actions we need to do.
So noted, and I will have an update for and I'm I mean, most of you get updates from me when I do get something substantive, but we are in contact with DEM, but we don't have an update. I will say, with respect to the backlog, just so you know, DEM and FEMA have hired KPMG because they don't have the staff. So they're actually being outsourced to private vendors to handle the processing and document review. Like on one of the that was approved, we did receive a request for information, which was easy. We responded, but it didn't come from FEMA. It came from KPMG as their vendor. So backlog is an understatement with FEMA right now.
I understood that's where they were, and so I just wanted to be cognizant of that we but I don't think this case, that squeaky a little bit wouldn't be a bad idea. So I'm in support of the soft touch. Yeah, medium squeak.
Medium squeak.
Okay.
Not
So
tiny squeak.
are we all in concurrence with this? Yeah. Okay. Fantastic. Is there anything else?
Those were all the attorneys.
Okay.
Commissioner comments?
Yeah, go ahead, and if there is commissioner comments.
There's one comment, because I don't know if I made it when we were talking about the procedures, meeting procedures. There were some concerns raised by some residents about some of the the language in there. For example, one of the ones was approaching the dais, and I think it's important to note that at the workshops, some of that information, some of those requests and that wording was from the chief
Who was
himself.
sitting up here for the workshop telling
Yeah.
us what he needed.
And so
Oh, thank you for clarifying that, yeah.
That was the chief's.
Right, that was attributed to me, and it wasn't me.
Yeah, because it is about we're a small municipality, we're, very cordial and friendly here, we should be, but we have to defer to the experts, and when the chief is the expert when it comes to safety, security, physical security especially. So I take it very serious when he makes that recommendation that he would like to see language like that. I think residents need to know that that's not coming from the commission. That's coming from the chief of police.
Yep. Correct.
I had a commissioner comment. I'm sure we were all on the receiving end of an email from a resident asking why we were somehow delegating our duties to a charter review committee and not reviewing and revising the charter on our own. And I just wanted to say that I think we've all demonstrated an industriousness here of each of our own ilk. And I think we probably would have been happy to review the charter and suggest revisions on our own, but that I think would have ended up with us being accused of driving an agenda, and to have a charter review committee that does that independently and has their own discussions, I think is the better and more autonomous way for those conclusions to be reached. We can debate and discuss them, but I think if we had decided to take that on ourselves, we would have been accused of driving on our own agenda. So I do think that this falls under one of the categories of damned if you do, damned if you don't. And I think we have a well-qualified group of residents to lead that process, and I did promise I would address this concern on the dais when I responded to that email, and I think that it is the best solution. Were we doing it on our own, I think we would have received a similar email saying, that we shouldn't be doing it ourselves. So, hopefully that charter review committee will serve the village well, and we will come out with a polished and more effective charter as a result. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right. I believe the village clerk was coordinating the date. Is that first meeting set? The vote because
It's right here on the thing.
October 3rd.
It's right here. First one under announcements. With that in mind, I will defer to the announcements, Madam Clerk.
Advisory Board Workshop Field Trip, Thursday, October 3, 2019, 7 a.m. Charter Review Advisory Board, first meeting, Thursday, October 3, 2019, 6:30 p.m. at Ed Burke Recreation Center. Planning and Zoning Advisory Board, Monday, October 7, 2019, 6:30 p.m. Biscayne Park Foundation, Monday, October 7, 2019, 7 p.m. Public Art Advisory Board, Wednesday, October 9, 2019, canceled. Planning and Zoning Advisory Board, Monday, October 15, 2019, 6:30 p.m. Parks and Parkway Advisory Board, Thursday, October 17, 2019, 5:30 p.m. And Public Safety Advisory Board, Wednesday, October 23, 2019, 6 p.m. Regular Commission meeting will be Tuesday, November 5th, 2019, 7 p.m. All village departments will be closed on Monday, October 14, 2019, Columbus Day. Oktoberfest, Biscayne Park Foundation will be on Saturday, October 19, 2019, 7 p.m. And Halloween, Thursday, October 24, 2019.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Thank you.
Second that.
Meeting adjourned. Caesar, thank you for the mic experience. Thank you for trying so hard.